We'll just give it a minute for people to enter our Zoom room. Okay, welcome to the regular meeting of the Larkspur City Council on Wednesday, May 7th, 2025. It's now 6:30 p.m. We have a very full agenda tonight. So a lot of you are here, I know, to speak to us on a public comment period, but we also have a planning commission appeal, and we have a budget process, and we have our firefighters in the back going to do a presentation. So you are all welcome to stay for the duration, but it's understandable if you're here for your subject matter and you decide to leave. But we are, everyone is welcome, and we're very glad you're here. I would like to begin with a roll call.
Councilmember Candell.
I'm here.
Councilmember Margulies.
Here.
Councilmember Paulson.
Here.
Vice Mayor Andre.
Here.
Mayor Way.
Here. If you're able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. That brings us to item 2 on the agenda, which is public comment. The council is here to hear public comment for anyone in the audience on matters that are not on tonight's agenda. I'd like to remind people that public comment, since it has not been put on the public agenda, we can't have lengthy discussion about it, but we can get some staff opinions and information that comes from them. So if you'll come forward at the podium, introduce yourself, and please keep it to under 3 minutes, please.
My name's, sorry, is this on? It is on.
Sound.
There we go.
There you
My name's Ross Hasselstein. I'm from San Anselmo. I snuck here under the cover of daylight savings. I'm friends with Catherine Way and been working with, been part of looking at the flood control district efforts with Gabe Paulson. I came to say that a couple of things. I'm going to give almost the same discussion at Fairfax, Ross, and San Anselmo. And that is Gabe is doing a great job of trying to understand and gather information. My own experience is that foresees that there's a really big legal mess at the end of this that needs to be detangled and looked at really hard in terms of liabilities that's being built into the flood district right now. For those maybe much older in the room, there was about a decade of lawsuits in the 70s and 80s about what was happening with the Army Corps of Engineers work. What's being built now is an even bigger mess because it's little tiny obligations of which can have detrimental effects. Things like if the Fairfax Basin does not work as planned, even though it does a small bit of flood control, if it's not maintained and there's a flood in Fairfax, there can be viable lawsuits. You should know that you got a grant from the flood district for $1 million to help build a pump station in the Hillview neighborhood. If there's a flood there, unfortunately, that's all Larkspur's fault because of the way that's structured. But if there's a flood in the Granton Park neighborhood where there's also a pump station and there's a big lawsuit there because the pumps don't work, everyone up and down the district pays. There's structured problems in this, including there's going to be no more money after 2027, 28. And things need to be maintained in order to work. So I put together far too much detail because that's the way my career is built. Last big job was 2 towers, 650 condominiums, $400 million. And I was in charge. And I spent the last 2 years just mitigating and looking at risks. So what you'll see, or at least what Catherine and Gabe have seen, is a crazy amount of information that's really trying to avoid something and provide benefit to the community. So with that, I thank Gabe for his efforts and any support he gets from this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, Mayor Way, Warren Wells.
Yes, hi, Warren.
Policy and Plan Director for the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. Today I'm here to deliver a petition, which you'll find in your packet, distributed by MCBC and the volunteer group Friends Open Alto Tunnel, To date, the petition has been signed by over 2,200 people, 300 of whom reside in Larkspur, and it asks that the Marin County Supervisors continue work on the Alto Tunnel. That call was joined by over 24 organizations from Marin and around the Bay, ranging from sustainability groups to small businesses. Like its sister, the Cal Park Hill Tunnel, which was reopened in 2010 to connect Larkspur and San Rafael, the Alto Tunnel was part of the Northwestern Pacific Railroad and was built to allow trains to avoid Marin's hills. Like Cal Park, we imagine Alto Tunnel reopened and rehabilitated to allow walking and bicycling to create a flat, safe route between central and southern Marin, seamlessly connecting nearly 10 miles of multi-use paths on both ends, many created thanks to the far side investments from this city. The people who signed this petition are saying the options they have for getting between Mill Valley and Corte Madera Larkspur, namely riding over Camino Alto or Horse Hill, aren't working. Both have a history of severe injury crashes, and even though the somewhat less demanding Horse Hill route is equivalent to climbing a 20-story building, a daunting proposal for most. They're saying that they'd rather ride or walk than sit in traffic on 101. They want to get out of their cars. Projects like this would help them do it. The key path to hitting our climate goals, our traffic goals, our road safety goals is to reduce overall driving. When more people choosing to leave their car at home for short trips, we'll have cleaner air, less congested streets, and fewer crashes. The best and only way to convince most people to ride a bike for short trips is to build safe places to ride separate from traffic. We know this won't be an easy project or a quick one, but happily the money is out there. Naysayers point to the project's cost, but in 2022, Santa Cruz County received over $100 million in state funding for Rails to Trails projects like this, roughly twice the cost of the Alto Tunnel. Grant programs exist for just such a purpose and would not require funding to be pulled from cities or schools. No one is going to give us that money, though, unless we ask for it, and that's why we're here today. While the project is one that will be led by the County of Marin, we need to show the Board of Supervisors that neighboring jurisdictions support the project. We're seeking resolutions of support from Larkspur, as well as Corte Madera and Mill Valley, both of which previously passed supporting resolutions, but long ago enough they deserve a renewal. Let's get this project back on track. It clearly aligns with policies across Marin to facilitate active travel and improve safety. We just need our county to find funding for preliminary design and environmental analysis so we can see whether the project can move forward in a sustainable way. We have provided a draft resolution for your consideration, which you'll find in the packet. And I thank you all for your time and consideration.
So Mr. Wells, I just want to acknowledge to everybody that you did submit a written public comment and that went to all the council members. And I know a lot of you are in the audience would like to speak on this and you have an opportunity to. But before we go any further, can I just have our city manager sort of weigh in on where we stand in Larkspur's ability to influence this? You can have a seat.
Great,
Thank you.
The council's longstanding policy that you don't adopt or waive positions that affect other planning jurisdictions without first soliciting the opinion or input of those jurisdictions. This project is not in your planning jurisdiction. It's in other agencies' jurisdictions. And so if I were to follow the policy you previously adopted, I should refer this out to the affected agencies for feedback and before I would put it on the agenda.
Okay. Did everybody hear that okay? Okay. You didn't hear it? Okay. Can we just synopsize? Yeah, we have.
This isn't in our jurisdiction. It is in other agencies' jurisdiction. It affects them. Your policy says staff should solicit feedback from those jurisdictions before we would put this on the agenda.
Okay. So as long as that's clear, you're welcome to join us for more public comment.
Good evening, friends. I'm Dwayne Price from up there on Elm Avenue.
Hi, Dwayne.
Catherine. There are a whole lot of real good reasons to open this tunnel for cyclists and pedestrians. There are two I want to mention because they do affect Larkspur. First is we have Mill Valley Middle School over there. We have Hall Middle School over here. Those kids go back and forth for various activities. How do they do it? Mommy or daddy drives them. When that tunnel is open, a whole lot of those kids are going to get on their bikes and zoom. And some parents are going to be very relieved and quite appreciative. The other thing I want to mention is tourism. If you go out there on the bike path, the Sausalito Mill Valley bike path for a while, you'll see a lot of rental bikes coming from San Francisco. And by the way, you'll also hear a whole lot of different languages. But those people ride across the bridge, ride through Sausalito, get to Mill Valley, take a right turn, go down to Tiburon, get on the ferry to get back into the city. When that tunnel is open, a whole lot of those people are going to come on through that tunnel. They're going to come over here and they're going to stop for breakfast, stop for lunch, and then they're going to go on down and pick up the Larkspur ferry. So, yeah, Larkspur's got something in this game here. So please, let's get on it. Let's do something about it.
Thank you, Dwayne. Yes, ma'am.
Hi,
Pull the
I-
mic down. So yeah, thank you.
I'm Elizabeth Swearingen. I live in Larkspur and I come to tell my own personal story about being a bicyclist in Larkspur, and especially going on the routes of Camino Alto and Horse Hill. I've done them both, and it is possible for somebody in decent shape to do it. However, for the majority of people, which includes senior citizens, kids, people who aren't in the best shape, and handicapped and so forth, this is pretty impossible. I've heard people say, well, you can do Horse Hill instead of Camino Alto, but it really isn't much better. The other more important thing is safety. It's really scary being a bicyclist on Camino Alto, and to some degree the same on the Horse Hill route. There's less cars, but it's still scary with all those turns and uphills and so forth, and it's a long way. I have son and daughter-in-law and 2 grandchildren who live in San Francisco. And they travel here. They do not have a car. They travel here on bicycles to visit us, and they do it often. And I asked my son, I told him I was going to talk tonight. I asked him what he thought, what his thoughts were about coming over. And his comment was, Camino Alto is treacherous, especially during rush hour and at night. Now, these are my grandchildren, my granddaughters. They're 7 and 2 years old, and they're going on a treacherous route. And I support, just like my son and daughter-in-law, I support people riding bicycles, and I think an awful lot of people in Larkspur support it too. But this is just scary and not possible. And of course, people aren't going to be riding bicycles over those places because either they can't or they're just too scared to do it. And so I am voicing my support for making this change. And besides that, it's a lot easier. If I've driven a car over Camino Alto too, if there are no bicyclists there, it's a lot easier to drive a car. Same for bicyclists, it's scary and hard. For cars, it's not that easy either. So please
Thank you.
consider seriously supporting this.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm Jim Kersner. My wife and I live at 38 Rose Lane in Larkspur.
Got it.
And I'm 81 years old at this point, and I've spent 20 years trying to get this tunnel open. And during the 20 years, the value of opening the tunnel has increased dramatically. We now have substantially more auto traffic congestion and increasingly significant bicycle use. My family's always prioritized using bicycles over cars for transportation. And now we have grandchildren in Corte Madera, Mill Valley, and they use bikes to get to and from school and to go to soccer and other activities. But the missing link for all of us and for thousands of others is the Corte Madera and Mill Valley connection. We need a safe and not too difficult route that's isolated from dangerous traffic. So during the last 20 years, there's also been significant investment in infrastructure for cycling both on both sides of that ridge. And this again is the last missing link. And the investment in infrastructure included opening a tunnel between Larkspur and San Rafael. Opening the Alto Tunnel is the last and maybe the most important missing link. So I think the residents of Larkspur would benefit significantly from having this thing open. And I'm asking you to agendize a resolution in support of the project.
Thank you, sir. Just a reminder that this tunnel is not in Larkspur's jurisdiction, so we have just to keep that in mind for people.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Matt.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. My name is Matt Hartzell. I live at 38 Loma Vista Avenue in Larkspur. And I also ask you to agendize signing a letter, passing a resolution of support for the Alto Tunnel and sending it to Marin County, because I know that it is not in the city of Larkspur, but I would argue that Larkspur does have power and influence and would be a major beneficiary of this project. So I'm sure all of you have driven across Camino Alto, and I'm sure that you've noticed bicyclists riding on Camino Alto when you drive there. I could be one of them. It's on my commute to work in Mill Valley. I ride my bike over that hill many times a week. And you may be thinking, well, those bicyclists on Camino Alto seem to be doing just fine. And maybe they are. Those are the strongest and most confident bicyclists out there. And for them, they're confident, they're comfortable taking the lane and riding amongst traffic. And yes, so Camino Alto works fine for that sliver of the overall population, and that's about 10% of the population, give or take. There's a whole nother slice of the population, about 60%, people who want to ride a bike, but definitely would not feel comfortable riding it on a street like Camino Alto. And so that's who we're really supporting this project for. It's for all ages and abilities, for children, for families, for grandparents, for all the people who could never ride a bike over Camino Alto from Larkspur and Corte Madera to Mill Valley and Sausalito, but they could through a nearly flat tunnel. And I do want to speak for a minute about the issue of jurisdiction, because I realize, yes, it's in the city of Mill Valley, the town of Corte Madera, and the county of Marin, and not the city of Larkspur. But Larkspur is definitely in the sphere of influence and the nexus, the geographical nexus of places that benefit from and would contribute to and support this project with users. And there are many people who live in Larkspur who want to go to Mill Valley, and this would make it safer, faster, and reduce traffic on our roads. So I do urge you to consider Larkspur's role. You do have a role, and maybe we need to break out of this silo of thinking just within our municipal boundaries. Like we need to think more regionally, and this is a regional project of regional importance, and it's very important for all the constituents in this region to have a voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Hi.
Hi, I'm Lee Larson from Mill Valley.
Hi.
Thank you for this opportunity.
You came over the hill. Did you
I
come over
did.
the hill or
I
around
did.
the corner?
I drove my car. I've been volunteering, well, after 16 years of volunteering at my children's schools in Mill Valley, I looked around to see what could I do for my community. And this is what I discovered. Oh, there's this railroad tunnel that's been closed since the 1970s, and it would have a tremendous impact on reducing traffic in our Southern Marin region. And so this is what I've been focusing on since 2008. So I just wanted to say that I also ride my bike a lot, and I love to ride to appointments in Larkspur. And I ride through Larkspur and stop at shops. And I think it would be a real economic engine for Larkspur to have increased traffic by bike and by foot through the Alto Tunnel being reopened. So I really hope that you'll consider throwing your support to this project as a demonstration of how worthwhile it will be for Southern Marin to be more connected. And thank you for your
Thank you.
consideration.
I know we have a few people, thank you. I know we have a few more people in the room and we have some online. So I would ask if you have something
It'd be
new
short.
to contribute. I would love it, but we're really heard the gist of what your argument is at this
Okay.
point.
I'll
Thank
be
you.
very short. I'm Donald Herzog.
Hi, Donald.
Live in Mill Valley. This directly affects Larkspur. If the tunnel was open, I would have ridden my bike here. I'm not riding over Camino Alto in the dark, not at 83 years old. The county study shows that the Alto Tunnel is the only option that will result in significant reduction in vehicular traffic, 2,000 cars a day. It's amazing. Pollution and greenhouse gases. That affects Larkspur. The Center Market Trail, certainly most of it runs through Larkspur. This is a big deal and does directly affect Larkspur. And I please ask that you agendize it and have a resolution of support. Thank you for
Thank you.
your time. I know you're busy.
Thank you. We heard you, what you said.
Thanks.
Hi.
I'm Jennifer Malone. I live in Green Bay and I vote in Larkspur. And I'm a recreational road bike rider. And I'd just like to say, speaking as a senior, I think I'm in a group that's fairly large in this community. And I'll also speak for children. We just aren't going to ride over Camino Alto, period. And I have ridden over Horse Hill, but not in the last few years. I probably still could, but it would take a lot of the energy that I wanted to use to ride all the way to Sausalito. And I used to work in San Rafael. I did not ride my bike to work until the tunnel opened, the Cal Park Tunnel. And the minute that happened, I started riding my bike there. So, you make a flat, accessible route, it's safe, and it's not only good for cyclists, but obviously for pedestrians and others who are trying to get from one place to another. So I heartily endorse the project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So no one else is standing. Oh, join us. Yes, so hold on just a second. I know you want to speak on a different topic. Thank you all for your presentation and your discussion from the bike. I'm not going to go to public comment online yet. If you're people online who are going to speak on this Alto Tunnel issue, just know we've heard a lot of comments already. But now I'd like to offer public comment for other subject matter. There's a lot of people in the audience, so come on forward.
Good evening, Barbara Friday from 66 Meadowood. I'm so sorry, I'm developed a cold. So
No problem.
I don't
Barbara,
sound like
push,
myself.
pull your mic up a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, you have a faint, there you go.
There we go. So I'm here because we had a marvelous, successful event called Touch Trucks to benefit the new library this weekend. And I just wanted to thank the city of Larkspur for supporting it as profoundly as they did. Damon Hill, our library director, attended every planning meeting, and two of his staff were there that day to staff the children's area. Nick Stone from Parks and Rec was instrumental in making the event safe and also in the planning. And we used so much of his material, his gear, so it saved us a lot of money and expenses. And finally, Julian Skinner was so kind to lend us 4 City of Larkspur trucks, which the kids loved. And from his group, Jay, Geraldo, and Tony all were there that day as drivers to help assist the kids. So we had between 1,000 and 1,500 people. Seemed like the perfect amount. We raised a lot of money, and I just wanted, and the families and the kids were overjoyed happy. It really was just an A+ event. Stephanie maybe could weigh in, but in any case, thank you very much. And I really appreciate the support for the library.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara, for your continued work with Friends of the Library. That is the 4th year of that, right? Third. Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone else with public comment who is in the chambers? Terrific. Let's go, Allison. We see 2 hands raised.
Yes, our first speaker will be Odin Palin.
Thank you, Barbara. Yeah. Hello, Mr. Payton.
Odin Palin.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, this is Odin Palin. I am a resident of Larkspur and a senior at Redwood High School. And I very often go over Horse Hill and Camino Alto to commute to work in Sausalito to appointments in Mill Valley. And I know that this tunnel would be a tremendous benefit to the community, especially students and children who are not maybe fit enough to use the very arduous routes of Horseshoe and Camino Alto. And I also know that with the opening of the tunnel between Larkspur and Santa Fe, I know that is very well used. I use it myself multiple times every week, just because when you create that flat route, that's an all ages and abilities facility, that it really just induces more trips for biking, especially for those who would not consider it at first. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It looks like we have one more public comment, raised in the Zoom room.
Our next caller ending in 1402.
James Holmes.
Hello, Mr. Holmes.
Hi, I'm not sure why there's a big push on this issue at this meeting, but I would urge you not to agendize it anytime soon. There have been oodles of studies that have determined that the costs are staggering and that the logistics are insuperable, far, far more than the Santa Fe tunnel. This tunnel was built on the cheap by a 19th century undercapitalized railroad. It was on the verge of collapse when my dad and I walked through it in the 70s after the railroad ended. It has now since collapsed in parts. It is now massively plugged in parts. This is really not something that we should turn to and make ourselves a joke in Washington and on Fox News. So please do not agendize it, and please encourage these folks who have trouble on Camino Alto to use e-bikes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Well, that would be a culmination of my career to be on Fox News. But thank you. We will close public comment. I see no more hands raised, Allison. Is that correct? And thank you all for your presentation. I would like to also acknowledge we have one written comment that came in, and it is posted online and on our agenda from Mr. Pollock. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for your comments, and they have been heard, and we will move forward to item 3, which is presentations. Today, we have a presentation from the Climate Action Forum update, and I believe Assistant City Manager Shannon O'Hare will be initiating that.
Good evening, Mayor Way, members of the City Council and the community. My name is Shannon O'Hare, and I am the Assistant City Manager. As part of our ongoing enhanced dedication to climate efforts in the city of Larkspur, we established a Climate Action Forum earlier this year, and as part of establishing that forum, we designated a dedicated staff member, which is myself, to the forum, as well as a dedicated council liaison, which is Councilmember Margulies, to provide input to the forum. So I will only be here to answer any questions. Actually, the main presentation is going to be given by our fabulous climate liaison. I am happy to provide any answers to questions that may be more appropriately directed to staff or provide additional information that folks would like. I will just provide some background here at the beginning before we move forward. There are a lot of faces in the audience tonight who may not be familiar with our entire process. As outlined in our climate action plan, it's been Larkspur's goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions over 40% below 1990 emissions in 2030. That is a tall order for us to work on. At the February 5th, 2025 meeting, the City Council passed the resolution that created the Climate Action Forum. On April 9th, we had our inaugural meeting, and the forum is meant to complement and help inform our community and regional partnerships, as well as have engaged members of the community attend the first meeting of the Climate Action Forum. All Climate Action Forum materials, if you want to see past, present, or future, are all available at cityoflarkspur.org/climate. I won't go through all of this. We have a lot on our agenda tonight, but this was our working agenda for our first meeting. It included us establishing the forum, welcoming each other, staff providing an update on what we are accomplishing at the regional levels and our partnerships, as well as a number of presentations from staff that discussed really what the purpose of the forum was. And one of the ways we accomplished that was by the creation and discussion of a mission statement. We also reviewed the prioritization of high and medium priority climate action items. If anyone has browsed through this document, it's not exactly beach reading. There's a lot for us to do and there's a lot for us to digest. So one of the things we really heard from the community is, how do we process all of that? What can we do? And how can we hear from the city about exactly what you're doing on this, rather than by a project to project basis? How is the whole picture looking? And the rest of this will be, I'll hand this off to Councilmember and Climate Liaison Margulies for her report on the meeting.
Thank you, Shannon.
And all of this is posted on our website for people to review should they be interested.
This will be posted on this on our website will be there after this. I'll be doing this later in the meeting. So it'll
Terrific.
be on cityoflarkspur.org/climate.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Shannon. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about the debut meeting. We feel it was a great success. We had 18 members of the public in attendance. 2 of those members were online. And I really want to thank Assistant City Manager Shannon, who has been working really hard and continues to work diligently to facilitate the success of this CAF. Together, we're really trying to do a lot of work, and she's been instrumental. And as with most new processes, we have identified a couple of areas for improvement and we'll continue to iterate. After the first meeting, we discussed that it would be it'd be critical to iterate on the meetings as we move through subsequent CAFs, climate action forums. Including seating formation for more collaborative roundtable type discussions, as well as an improved remote attendance experience. After the first meeting, I'm trying to keep up with the slides, so I apologize. Yeah, but I gotta move on here. After the first meeting, we accomplished establishing the mission statement of the CAF. It's been agreed upon, and we expect to adopt it at the June CAF, which is happening on June 11th. We also reviewed a draft dashboard and for reporting out climate action plan implementation priorities to council as well as members of the community. It is being enhanced based on feedback from the group, and an updated format will be presented at the June 11th CAF as well. The CAF also agreed that in order to achieve the greatest impact, the priority focus needs to be on actions associated with low carbon transportation, which have a potential reduction of 45% of greenhouse gas emissions, and renewable energy and electrification, which contribute 23% of potential reductions. So together, targeting 68% total potential reductions. Therefore, the immediate recommendation to council is to take the following actions. Let me see if I'm keeping up here.
There you go.
Okay. So to direct staff to revise the April 2023 draft resolution for adopting REACH codes to eliminate the all-electric for newly constructed buildings, which is no longer viable due to the 2023 Ninth Circuit Court decision in California Restaurant Association versus the City of Berkeley, and to move forward with a public reading of a revised ordinance to address 2 REACH codes, which include enhanced energy efficiency for major remodels through a point system that encourage but do not require electrification, as well as enhanced EV charger requirements. The addition of these 2 above REACH codes in Larkspur would be instrumental in driving toward the 2030 CAP results, and they align directly with specific actions outlined in our climate action plan. CAF believes the opportunity to move forward implementing these REACH codes is now. In order to precede a possible passage of AB 306. And for those of you who are not aware of AB 306, it is a pending state law that would put a freeze on any building code revisions for 6 years, starting this year. So we believe the time is now to act, or CAF believes the time is now to act. Just a quick summary from an Assembly third reading of the AB 306 is that imposes a moratorium on the adoption or modification of new state and local building standards affecting residential units from June 1st, 2025 until June 1st, 2031, with limited exceptions. It's relevant to note that both Menlo Park and San Mateo have adopted REACH codes this year. And in order to adopt an ordinance that doesn't require CEC approval, the ordinance must be based on public safety. Good news is Larkspur's local climatic, topographical, and geological conditions have been established in the existing draft ordinance, which would enable council to adopt the ordinance based on public safety. In adopting said REACH codes, Larkspur would be, quote, catching up, end quote, with other jurisdictions who have implemented these codes years ago, including Marin County, San Rafael, Fairfax, San Anselmo, Tiburon, and Corte Madera. As a result, Larkspur can benefit from our neighbors' experience in addition to some education materials produced by Corte Madera for educating the public on these REACH codes. And I have some of those to share if people are interested to look at them. So I will
Great.
end there.
Thanks. So it sounds like from your first committee meeting, you've come up with two questions you'd like the council to address, which is whether we should direct staff to revise the April 2023 draft resolution to meet the current state law that was due to changes of the Ninth Circuit. And the second was to suggest that we move forward in revising ordinances to address the two REACH codes. Did I have that correct?
Not exactly. I think
Okay.
that we would like them to revise the ordinance to remove the all electrification requirement. So it's just an edit to the ordinance.
Okay.
Yep. And then to do a public reading to move forward with it.
Is there something, Shannon, that you wanted to
So
add
just
to
to
that?
provide some context to folks, a couple of years ago, the city presented a whole draft ordinance in a discussion, as a discussion topic for electrification codes to the council and the community. And then there was this decision. So when there's things referred to as we're taking parts out of this, we're changing it, that's to reflect changes in the law that have happened. And again, this climate action form is brand new, so we're still learning as we go. Because of the format we've decided to adopt, we thought that one of the things where it requires additional staff time or part of a work plan that would be brought before the city council at the liaison, if the liaison would like to discuss with his or her colleagues, in this case, her colleagues, bringing something to the council that the council at one of in discussion
Okay.
could decide whether you'd want to direct staff to work on this.
Okay.
As part of a work plan to bring forward to another city council meeting, because if we could share information with the community, but the climate action forum can't take action on this. This is a council
Got it.
item.
Okay. Thank you. Are there
Sure.
questions of either Councilmember Margulies or Assistant City Manager from the council on these two matters? Yes.
On these suggested changes that you're talking about, you're just kind of brushing over what they are as far as point system. Is there somewhere where it goes into detail about what that is and the EV charging requirements? Where can I learn about? I'm not familiar with the point system or what those requirements would be.
There is this original draft ordinance has that information in it, so we can point you in that direction
Okay.
for certain. And I think you would be able to get all the information you need there, but I can also share with you information about the point system that has been set up in Corte Madera. It's similar, but Shannon, do you have anything to add to that?
Additionally, I would just suggest that if we brought this before the council and the community, this would all be laid out in
Yeah.
both a written staff report as well as a verbal presentation to provide more context.
Okay, so at this point, I can't say whether I support these things or not because I'm not familiar enough with them. So if we're asking to bring it for, I guess, a vote, I would just want to make sure that there's some explanation so I could understand what I'm voting on.
Yeah.
That's all.
Really?
So just so I'm clear, this was proposed in April 2023 and we're bringing it back, but we're going to remove one of the three items. Is that essentially what's happening here? Or are
Correct.
the other two below, are there any modifications that are happening on the two that you want us to reconsider?
That would be determined by a reading and further discussion at council level. But the initial proposal is to bring it back in a revised format and remove the first part of
Right.
it that is not viable due to the Ninth
Okay,
Circuit
great. Okay, great.
decision.
There'd be some additional work that would be done on this at the staff level. So at that point, the Community Development Department would be more involved to provide any additional comments, and it would have a full review by the city attorney's office.
Gabe, anything? So it sounds like, thank you for that. It sounds like this committee is well on its way to really finding its footing and bringing forward some revisions that are legally based, revisions that have come about from the court decisions. So it sounds like, from what I don't hear any further discussion or conflict with the idea of moving forward and continuing to bring these forward to the council as they get drafted and revised. You're all right with that, everybody? I see Mr. Mahler's hand raised. It is a presentation which I do have the prerogative to be able to have public comment if you would like to speak. Make it short and sweet, my friend. We have a long night ahead of us, and thank you for your participation in this committee. I know it's been a passion of yours for a long time. So.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. David Mahler, I live here in Larkspur. If I had known there was any question about being able to speak to the presentation, I would have done during the public comments. So my error on that. So I just wanted to report out very briefly as a member of the public who attended the meeting. I thought it was very high value. I thank the council for going ahead and approving the establishment of this. I thought Assistant Manager O'Hare and the liaison, Councilmember Margulies, did really a very good job. When you're starting something off, it's sort of, how do you get this stuff going? As was noted, very good attendance with some very good recommendations coming back to the council, which Councilmember Margulies went over. So I just wanted to kind of report out from the community standpoint as well. Very high value, good participation. I think it'll be high value going forward. On this specific recommendation about reviving these two reach codes, the only reason they were set aside was because the Ninth Circuit Court decision came out 1 week. Actually, it was less than 1 week before a public workshop, which all the council members attended. It was the first item on a council meeting. All the council members attended, heavily attended by the public, and everyone wanted these to go forward. But the question was, with the Ninth Circuit decision, can we go forward with these three reach codes? It's quite uncertain how broad the Ninth Circuit would apply. Ultimately, it was decided through a lot of testing of that decision that the only thing that decision affected was all electric for newly constructed building. And yet, for 2 years now, those other two reach codes have just been sitting there waiting to get revived and moved ahead for adoption by the city. So to your point, Councilmember Candell, absolutely it'll go over, but you can look at that report and see exactly what they say. So they were ready to go. And the only reason they were put aside was because of the Ninth Circuit decision. And it's time to move those ahead and join the other 6 jurisdictions who have had those in place for a couple of years now, because they passed them before the Ninth Circuit decision. So we're just trying to catch up with the others who've had these in place and have had very good results with them.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Nothing further from the presentation. That sounds like your next meeting is June 11th, and continue working on these ordinances and revisions to the ordinances that, as outlined, would be really valuable for us, I think. So, all right. I don't see anybody else to speak on this, so I will close presentation, and that moves us to item 4. Thank you, Sarah, for that. Approval of the consent calendar. Are there any council members who'd like to take an item off of the consent calendar for discussion? Is there any member of the public who'd like to take an item off the consent calendar for discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Motion to approve this consent
Is
calendar.
there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? No? No abstentions? No. All right, that passes. That brings us to item 5, the city manager's report, please.
I will keep my remarks brief for you, Madam Mayor. So foremost, wanted to let folks know that before your next meeting, we have applications are due if you're interested in being considered for the vacancy on the library board. And we still are trying to get applicants for the rent review board. So you can visit our website for more information about that. And then I just wanted to join the course of thanking, we had a number of staff people helping the Friends of the Library pull off a successful event. Want to acknowledge Nick Stone from Recreation, Damon Hill, obviously from the library. Some of his staffs was supportive. And then, as you heard, we had some public works folks out there. And I understand we sort of made a last minute delivery of some tractors, which were very popular with some of our younger visitors. So I just wanted to thank all the staff who helped make that happen. So
Thank you. Are there any questions of the city manager? Okay. Moving to council members' reports. I'll begin on the left. Gabe, anything?
Sure. Yeah, so a couple comments. I was at the SMART board meeting today, and we're in budget season, similar
As we all are.
as we all are. And I thought, it's kind of instructive to see some of the parallels. They're about $50-60 million agency, 4 big missions, the ridership, the trails that kind of came up in public comment. There's a whole plan for trails that go up to Cloverdale. And then also the freight and the extensions going up to Windsor and beyond. And it was a very interesting discussion. One of the big issues is the SMART sales tax will have to be renewed. And without that, most of this is in question. So it's an interesting time. And I would just encourage our own council to ride the train sometime if you haven't, in the public. And one of the reasons I think it's what makes Larkspur a unique transportation hub is SMART, Ferry 101, and kind of gives you some perspective why our voice is quite important in this discussion. The second comment is I have been participating in Flood Zone 9. We got some public comment, and I'll perhaps bring that. Most of it is really more that, Ross Valley District. And I'm trying to determine what role Larkspur plays in that. That's kind of my job, but I'm also chairing the committee. So some of the, issues that were brought up are relevant. And I actually went to Ross and visited 4 residences there on the creek. And that's not in Larkspur, but I feel like there's just such a long history. And I really want to understand, gather the facts, and, we'll be advising the Board of Supervisors on what action to take. So.
Great. Sarah, anything else? Okay. Scott, anything?
Not today.
Very quickly, as your representative to MCE, which is Marine Clean Energy, which, if you don't know, is a nonprofit public utility. They are celebrating 15 years today.
Wow.
And so they serve 38 communities throughout Marin County, Contra Costa, Solano, and Napa counties. About 585,000 households and businesses. They're a great company. You have to opt into Marin Clean Energy. So you have a choice of who your electric utility provider is. And so you can choose PG&E or you can choose Marin Clean Energy. And Marin Clean Energy's mission is to provide fossil-free energy. They contract with energy suppliers to bring businesses and households clean energy. But you do have to opt in. I mean, many years ago when it started, you opted out. But so if you're not in it now, you have to opt in. And I'm happy to give you more information, or you can go to MCE's website to get more information. And then secondly, I did want to just thank our staff. Couple of things. One, Piper Park looks very good, as does the William Street bike path. They've all been mowed and weeded, and everything looks great. And also Monte Vista has been repaved. And I know residents, I heard a lot from residents who live on that road. But thank you to our public works and maintenance staff for making that happen.
Thanks. Just something short from me. I think tonight we are going to hear a planning commission appeal, and it's very important in our small town that people participate. And there are lots of opportunities to be a member of a committee or a board, or even run for city council, or to volunteer as a planning commissioner or a park and recreation commissioner or a library board commissioner. We we have such a great town because people step up and volunteer for that and do their best to make the best decisions that they can, and working with our staff. And I always want to encourage people to step up and participate to the best of their ability, because this is what makes our town work. There will be election in 2026. There will be 3 spots on the city council, 1 for sure. I am not running again. So I encourage everyone who has an interest in really making policy decisions for this great town to take this opportunity to step up and to be in these roles, because they're very important roles. That being said, I am moving on to item number 7, which is a public hearing. We have 3 public hearings tonight. The first one is an appeal of the Planning Commission decision to approve application PLN 23-45 at 21 Chevy Chase Court. So let me just fill everybody in on how tonight's going to go, particularly for the first item. The rest of the items are pretty straightforward. A Planning Commission appeal has an opportunity for the appellants who have filed the appeal to present first. And usually what our city does is give you a 10-minute period of time to present your argument as to the reason for the appeal and the request of the city council to examine certain things. Then we'll ask questions of that time. And then the homeowner or the owner of 21 Owlswood has an opportunity to come forward for 10 minutes and give us feedback or information, and we can ask questions at that time. But before we do that, we have our Community Services Director as our staff person give a staff report to us, the City Council, in which we can ask questions first of that before we hear the appellant, so we can really know what's going on that way. And before I open the public hearing, however, for this matter, I would like to ask our city attorney, Skye Woodruff, to give a few-minute overview on how a planning commission appeal to the city council works procedurally, so that we're all in the same understanding of how this works. And we can ask questions of that too. The city council members can. And I'm doing that for the public's understanding and knowledge, and also because we have a few council members who this is a newer experience to engage in a public hearing about a planning commission decision. So opening public hearing, and I would like our city council to, our city attorney to do an overview, please.
Thank you, Mayor. If I speak from this distance from the mic, can members of the public hear me?
Can everybody hear? No.
Okay.
Bring it closer to your face. Just raise your hand if you can't hear, and I'll make sure.
Okay.
And what about our video person? Can you hear okay? Cool.
Okay.
Great.
I will hold the mic instead of leave it on the table. Normally when the city council makes decisions, it is acting in a legislative capacity, policy-making capacity, even in many instances in which the council is holding a public hearing. When the city council is considering appeals of planning commission decisions, it is acting in a quasi-judicial capacity. It is adjudicating a decision on an application in which the applicant has requested certain permits from the planning commission. Those have been approved. In this case, another member of the public has filed, or members of the public have filed an appeal, and the city council is asked to make a decision. The city council's decision-making role has some bounds on it. One is that the municipal code states that these types of appeals are what lawyers love to fancify and call de novo, but which the municipal code more simply states as a new hearing, which means that you are not bound by the decision of the planning commission. You are not reviewing the decision of the planning commission. The city council is considering the evidence on its own and making a determination about whether or not to grant the permits for which the applicant has requested approval. Each of those permits in the municipal code has with it a set of findings that must be made in order to approve them. A finding in California law means that the city council must look at the evidence before it and make a determination about whether or not it can, on the basis of substantial evidence, make those findings. Substantial evidence means reasonable, adequate evidence to support the finding. The staff report and the resolution that the staff have prepared identify the evidence that is in the record already that staff believes provides substantial evidence to support each of the required findings that must be made. So if the council agrees, all it must do to make a decision would be to adopt the resolution, which would deny the appeal and approve each of the requested permits based on the evidence that the staff has identified in the record. If council identifies other evidence in the record that justifies denial of the permits, then it should identify that evidence and use it as the foundation for explaining why members of the council believe that they cannot make the legally required findings for each of the permits. I guess I should add that evidence includes all of the written documents that are in the packet and includes the testimony that you're going to receive tonight, plus any documents that members of the public may submit to you if you're able to review them during the course of the hearing. I guess I should also add, though, that the substantial evidence standards requires that you rely on evidence, not conjecture, not opinion, not questions or concerns about the adequacy of the evidence that's before you. It requires reliance on actual evidence. So to use an example, just because I know actually, I'm going to step back from that and just say there are a number of technical reports that are in the packet that were the basis for making the recommendations that the staff did and that are cited as part of the recommended findings in the resolution. Those all constitute evidence. Counter evidence would be a similar report from an equivalent expert who has said that that there are other conclusions that could be reached factually on the same issue. So hopefully that's helpful in understanding what the nature of evidence is. Again, ultimately, the city council is acting in a quasi-judicial role. It is supposed to consider all of the evidence presented and determine whether or not there is substantial evidence to make each of the findings that's required for each permit that is requested. And I'm happy to take any questions about this.
Are there any questions of Sky on that matter? Yes, Scott.
Yeah. If we find there is evidence to support the findings needed, are we required then to come to the conclusion that we support that decision? Even if, I mean, do you understand my question?
I think I understand it. And this gets into a little bit more complicated area. So I'm going to do my best to try to explain it for the benefit of everyone. So there are a couple of things to consider. I mean, one is that ultimately there are policy considerations that might counterbalance the evidence that supports making the findings. That is part of the city council's role. However, city council has also adopted ordinances that are codified in the municipal code that say to members of the public, you may have these permits if there is substantial evidence to support the making of the findings that we believe are appropriate to determine that you should be able to receive these permits. So it may be that there are policy considerations that in a particular circumstance that would counterbalance doing that, but by the same token, what's in the municipal code already is an expression of the past city council's views on the same policy questions. So those need to be considered even if there are concerns that touch on the same policy. The other thing to concern, and this is also raised in the staff report, is the Housing Accountability Act. Some of you have heard this before. Although in this particular case, I do want to emphasize that the application of the Housing Accountability Act when there is a single family house with an ADU is an unadjudicated issue. Nevertheless, the city's certified housing element requires it to include a statement in the staff report that does identify that the Housing Accountability Act does have a role to play in consideration of even applications such as this. And so if council is inclined to deny the application and uphold the appeal or add additional conditions that may make the project infeasible, then at that point, I'll probably be interjecting to talk some more about the role of the Housing Accountability Act and how it might play out here and the potential legal risks for the city as a result.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we get started? And we'll ask you along the way too. So I reserve the right to ask. I did say a 10-minute per appellant, 10-minute for the homeowner. Do we do then a rebuttal? Are they offered an extra?
They are allowed to reserve time to provide a rebuttal if
Okay.
they'd like.
Is everyone clear on that then? Okay. And then we will then, in the public hearing part, after the appellant and the homeowner have had a chance, then we have public comment. So reserve your public comment until after that. So the public in the room can weigh in first, and then the public online can too. All right. So we would like to begin by having Community Services Director Elise Simonian as our staff person tee it up for us with a report.
Thank you.
And then Elise, I'll just let you know, I'd like, if council members have questions as we're going along in your report, would it be all right if they
Yeah, that's fine.
interjected? Okay.
Go ahead.
Because there's a lot of material here. It's very dense. And I know it was handled by a member of your staff for a while. So
Right. And I have, I've made the presentation brief. I don't have all the
Got the
plans
brief.
in there, but I am a member of the meeting. So if we need to pull up the plans and look at anything specifically, we could do that.
Okay. And I'd also like to acknowledge for all the homeowners and the appellants that I visited all four place home sites. And I believe Councilmember Vice Mayor Andre did also, and Councilmember Margulies also went to the sites. I didn't interact with anyone when I was there, and I don't believe you either interacted with anybody, but we've been visually there at the site. So go ahead.
So this is an application for a new house on a vacant lot that's known as 21 Chevy Chase Court and also 30 Owlswood. And I've highlighted in red let's see if this pointer will work, the project site, which is here, and then the appellant sites are these three highlighted blue sites. And so the site has access from Owlswood, which winds up the hill. It's a little difficult to see on this map, and it also has a frontage along Chevy Chase. And because the fire department because Owlswood's so narrow and difficult for them to turn around without a fire truck turnaround, they would like the site to be known as 21 Chevy Chase because that's where they would be getting access to the site. This project was heard by the Planning Commission on November 12th as a study session, and they provided the applicant with some feedback. It was a larger home at that time and had a slightly different design. And then the applicants modified the design and returned to the Planning Commission in March, and the project was approved. And I want to show you the site too on this topographic map, which hopefully is not too fuzzy from your perspective, but the site is right here. And I just wanted to show that all the other sites in this area have a very steep slope. So this site was created by a subdivision of sites surrounding it. So this site used to be part of the site right above, and they share a similar slope. And a lot of these sites share a similar slope, except along here where there's sort of a ridge between, and then these ones were built on the bottom of a very steep hillside. And then this is Owlswood winding up in front of the site. So the applicants received approval for design review for a new residence that's 1,890 square feet. And the project also includes a 506 square foot 2-car garage. That size required a floor area ratio exception. The total project, including a 468 square foot ADU,
was 2,864 square feet, where a 20% FAR is permitted. And when I say a 20% FAR is permitted, that's the code for the hillside based on the slope of the site would allow a 383 square foot house, a 400 square foot garage, and then under state law, the city's required to also approve an 800 square foot accessory dwelling unit. The project received a variance from the natural state requirement. Our natural state requirement is also based on the slope of the site. So 80% is required and 64% was approved. And the primary reason for that it would be very difficult to develop the site without a really tall structure if it was to comply with the 80% natural state requirement, which is less than even the lot coverage and floor area allowed, or equal to floor area, I guess. And then they also received a setback variance in order to construct stairs from the residence down to Chevy Chase, where a 10-foot setback would have been required. What I didn't mention on the slide is also a slope use permit was approved. The city requires a slope use permit when a site has 25 cubic yards of grading. This project was approved with 495 cubic yards of grading, which is primarily for the lower level of the residence.
So Elise, in November, there was the first Planning Commission meeting in which they gave recommendations and suggestions the commissioners did.
Right.
And then the homeowner came back for a second Planning Commission meeting confirming that they had made those changes. You're discussing what the final review decision was. Okay.
Right, and then I'll go into the plans.
That's okay. I think it's important that we know that they
made some modifications.
They made modifications based on recommendations by the original Planning Commission meeting in November.
Right.
And I also think we need to acknowledge that Commissioner Swisher had to recuse himself because he has a personal residence within the 500-yard law requirement that a council member recuses themselves from making a decision. So he was not there to make a decision.
He was not on the Planning Commission that made the decision, and then Liam Campbell was not at that meeting either. He works for the firm that prepared the geotechnical analysis for the applicant, and while that he didn't participate in the project and he didn't receive any money from that, he wanted to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest, and so he recused from hearing it too.
And those are issues that can come up in a small town like ours where people live, we have neighborhoods where a lot of people will live close with each other who are decision makers. So that's a requirement by state law. It's not, and it's also an ethics requirement that we have to not have a conflict of interest. Okay, so then you got to the Planning Commission meeting number 2.
Or that was the second.
That was the second one.
Right, that was when it was approved. I didn't go into the details of the first approval, but I just would have to pull up some information. It wasn't approval. It was just a hearing on the project. They gave general comments. They weren't at that hearing, the first hearing on the study session, they didn't provide a whole lot of feedback to the applicant.
Yeah.
But staff had written a staff report with recommendations on how the project should be modified, and some of them indicated they wanted the applicant to consider those recommendations.
And then they came back in March with having adopted many of those recommendations that staff gave and the planning commissioners gave at the study session.
They did. So they did change the design of the project. They reduced the size and they reduced the grading. They reduced some large retaining walls that were on the original plan that created some level yard space between the garage and the primary residence.
They added a stairwell for access.
They separated this. It's still considered attached under the city's definition, but there's a separation between the two structures, and definitely the roof lines changed. And the applicant may be able to give more detail, or the project architect's probably here and can give more details about everything that they changed.
Okay.
Between the two hearings.
And the commissioners asked a lot of questions about erosion and drainage. What did the homeowner do to address that issue?
So the geotechnical reports the applicant prepared geotechnical reports. The city retained our own geotechnical consultant to review those reports at the applicant's expense. And Craig Herzog was the city's geotechnical consultant. And the applicant's geotechnical consultant responded to concerns raised by our geotechnical consultant. And in the end, the city was comfortable with what was proposed. One of the issues is that this isn't the final plan. It's going to go through a building department process. There's going to be the foundations and everything on the plan will be detailed for the building permit plans. And then geotechnical review will happen again. And one of the comments our geotechnical consultant has said is because they do a single boring at the site, it's one of the issues that's been raised is that they only did a single boring, that if they discover other site conditions, when they do start to do grading, they would have to change their plan. But there's nothing that they've seen that indicates that the site can't be built on or that there's any evidence of landslides or something obviously dangerous at the site.
But it looks like the commissioner said they reserve the right, and when the city does, to if during the beginning of construction there are geotechnical issues that do arise, they reserve the right to require more assessment of that.
The city will require more assessment at the building
In
permit
general.
phase, right?
Yeah.
So the city won't approve a project unless we know that the project geotechnical engineers and structural engineers have signed off on the plan, and we've had our own engineers review that work. And then the conditions of approval also require the applicant to give us additional funds so we can have our geotechnical consultant review those plans one more time too, and ensure that everything's been incorporated that our geotechnical consultant has recommended. The Planning Commission, because due to neighbors' requests, that neighbors have expressed concern about the quantity of grading and what's going to happen if it changes. And so the Planning Commission did recommend that the project return if the grading increases. I've actually recommended approval in the resolution that allows a 10% flexibility. So because if it comes in at 496 or 420 cubic yards more, it is, of course, an impact to the neighbor to see one more truck or two more trucks or more going by. But having it come in exactly at that number seems a bit restrictive because the quantities, they haven't done the details. We don't know how deep the foundation is going to go or things like that.
And we in Larkspur and Greenbrae have a lot of steep slope building that goes on. I mean, this is a steep slope, having been there, but it's not unusual to have building on a steep slope like this one. And so we're familiar with the need for continuing to assess slope drainage issues.
Right. It's definitely important. When a project was presented for this site back in 1982, I think that was the first plan. A geotechnical report was prepared there, then didn't find anything. They'd done 5, they're not borings, but they're like test pits. And they found similar conditions to what the more recent studies found. Different foundation was proposed then, but that's because it was also different design. So there's nothing and that report also indicates, because it was 1983, that was right after the huge storms of 1982.
Oh, right.
But there wasn't any evidence of any issues on that site, even though there were issues on other areas of the city.
Did you have a question?
Elise, can I, excuse me for my ignorance here, but I want to understand why you chose 10% when I thought I read somewhere that 0.1% of slopage it was like 26 cubic removal of soil for grade. You just actually
25 cubic yards.
Sorry.
A slope use permit's required for 25 cubic yards of grading or more.
Right.
Right.
So I'm sorry if I'm making an incorrect correlation here, but why wouldn't you then tie your percentage to that and make it more like a 5%?
I mean, it could be modified, and it's condition number 3. So we could require it to come back for a smaller amount as well. And then just for some information, because it is a lot of grading, and one of the benefits of the grading is that the lower level is dug into the hillside, and so the house is sunk into the hillside. So it makes a difference in the appearance of the house. And if for example, the house was reduced in size, would likely be taken out of that level because that's the expensive part. So then the house would look essentially the same, but just have less grading. but also might be, less feasible from a financial perspective. But also, we don't know at this point, like how large the trucks are that are going to be taking the truck or the soil away. So I did some estimates, just if they were using a 16 cubic yard truck, that's 31 truckloads of soil, which means the truck's going back and forth 61 or 62 times, which is a lot of trips. And then for a smaller truck, like a 12 cubic yard truck, that's a total of 82 trips back and forth to the site to remove it. So I don't want to minimize that it's not a big impact. I mean, that's a lot of grading, but there are some benefits in the design by having it tucked in.
Scott, did you have something?
I do. It's a general question. So we as a community have set up rules. We said, okay, we're going to talk about how big do we want a house to be per parcel? And we talk about it and bring it before council. We have public comment and we say it's going to be this percent of the square footage of what you can build a house on. Why do we make exceptions?
Yeah, so it would be a lot easier if you just had a percent.
We do have rules.
But then you have a process to grant exceptions from that percent, which are regularly granted.
Why?
I think one reason is because, or the primary reason on hillside sites is because it allows so little square footage that it's just not reasonable because you can't build a family home for that amount.
But then why don't we change the regulations so they're reasonable?
Well, I think you listen here that there has been a subcommittee formed
Yeah.
by the planning
It's
commission
been bothering the planning commission
for a long time.
The other place where they're recommended all the time is on small sites, like in the ones in Heather Gardens, because the 40% that's allowed doesn't allow a very large site, a very large house size. And so they've continually granted floor area ratio exceptions in the Heather Gardens area to allow people to build larger homes. And then there used to be a minimum in the planning code so that it was intended so that the house wouldn't fall too small. But that when we were doing the housing element, that's seen as a barrier to housing, because if someone wanted to build a 150 square foot home, they wouldn't be able to do that. So we removed the minimums in response to state concerns about constraints to housing development.
I hear your policy question on that, but I mean, I think we have to reserve that for another day because the decision is based on what our current ordinances allow for. And unless we change that, we can't, going forward, we can change that. But right now, the decision is based on having that flexibility to increase the FAR.
Right.
And Sky wants to say something.
We have the flexibility. The question is, if we always exercise our ability to make exceptions, then we don't have any laws.
Yeah.
And it just, I mean, why should we grant it because somebody wants a bigger house? Oh, okay, that's good enough reason. I mean, anybody could do anything. I mean, I'm losing how I'm seeing that we have any laws to enforce if we're always going to make exceptions whenever somebody wants something that doesn't apply.
Sky, you wanted to weigh in on that as?
Yeah, I partly just to emphasize or state slightly differently what Elise already said, which is the municipal code does have a set of rules that effectively boil down to how big a house you can build. But the rules also include the exception process. So I think I would just, the way I look at it as a city attorney advising cities about these issues is to consider the entire regulatory framework, which includes not just the formula for how big a house you can build on a lot, but also the exception process that's built into it that acknowledges that particularly on sloped hillsides, particularly in communities like Larkspur that have very extreme slopes in some cases, but nevertheless have parcels that are buildable with those extreme slopes. And because the specific site conditions are going to be, you can't account for them in drafting a generally applicable code, that the exception process exists to provide exactly this opportunity for the Planning Commission to look at an application to assess the reasonableness of a proposed house on a site for that specific site.
So hang on. So since this is a new hearing, though, you're asking us to decide on the reasonableness. That's our standard here is
not reasonable. The the applicants and the appellants are asking you to weigh whether or not there is substantial evidence in the record that would allow the council to make the required findings to allow for the requested exceptions.
So it doesn't matter. We don't have to judge. Do we agree with this proposal? Do we not? It's just basically the statute allows for this. If conditions A, B, and C are met. If A, B, and C are met, we are required to grant an exception.
If conditions A, B, and C are met, there is a legal foundation to approve what is being requested. As I said in response to your initial question, if there are overarching policy concerns that counterbalance that would that would cause the city council to believe that there is a basis for public safety, public health, public welfare, some other basis to consider that despite the evidence in the record, there is a reason to modify the project through conditions or to deny the project. That is a discussion that you can have. But I think actually your question though about what are the rules and why are there exceptions to the rules, that's the reason I sort of the only reason I wanted to jump in, despite at least giving her answer, is to point out that the exceptions are part of the rules. This is what the past council has said, is that it has in effect acknowledged that many lots in Larkspur are difficult to build based on a generic set of generally applicable rules. And so the exception process exists to acknowledge that there will be circumstances in which a house that is something that otherwise conforms to the rest of the regulations that are in the municipal code needs an exception because it doesn't fit on the lot because of the unique circumstances of the lot.
So we have in our municipal code setback variances, natural state variances, and floor area ratio exceptions.
There's
generally
specifically a section for floor area ratio exceptions in the floor area chapter.
Okay.
And it does have findings that have to be made, which is primarily like, does it look good? Have they used mass reducing techniques? So that's very discretionary, but there are things, there are definitely techniques that can be used, and you'll see them around town when people pull in the upper story from the bottom level or don't use 14-foot ceiling heights. There's things they do look at to make those findings.
But I think to your point, and I think that's for another discussion, and I understand that Planning Commission also wants to have the discussion about maybe modifications to our ordinances need to be looked at because there are a lot of exceptions made for a lot of things based on our ordinances.
For this, I'm going to reserve my concerns until after the evidence comes in, and then I will probably revisit this
Yeah,
at
because
that
there's
point.
also unintended consequences
Yeah.
of making an objective standard now. So they're going to have to weigh a lot of facts.
Gabe, did you have something you wanted to bring up?
Sorry, just a really basic question about floor area ratios. So the lot size is 7,700 square feet, right? Because I think it's, I just did, it's 2,864 and then 37%. So it's 7,740. Is that 7,740 the face of it inclined, or is it the equivalent flat?
That's a good question. I guess you'd say as it's.
So if I
should
take
be-
a
it
tape
should be
measure up
same.
the
If
hill,
you take a tape measure up the hill, it should be the same size.
70, so it's
Yeah.
not like if I
It's
did the
not like
excavation and level, it'd be
as
that.
the crow flies over the top.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
you get that.
if you just do like a camera view of it, it's only 4,400 square feet. It's a Heather Garden lot size
Well, I mean,
at 55 angles.
if you're looking from above.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a really tiny lot from the top,
But
and
it's-
now we're building out. So basically, the house goes all the way. It's covering well over 50% of that area. Once it's built, if you look from an airplane, it's going to be bigger.
Possibly, because if you look at the, I don't know how visible it is again on this map, but like, for example, the one up above is essentially a similar size, the one at 235, I believe, but.
The Reese home. Yeah.
This one, the lot is here and the house is there. It does look, it's the same size lot, same size house. Well, actually, it's a larger house. And it does look like it covers a lot of the lot.
Okay, great. That's all I wanted to know. Thanks.
Okay. You more on your staff report or do
Oh,
we?
Sure. Just going to point out, this is the site plan. You have the plans. So I don't
Yes.
need to go over those details, but they do include a landscape plan. The proposal includes removal of 14 trees that have been declared to be fire prone by the fire department. 5 of those are heritage trees, and our code allows those to be approved because they've been determined to be a fire hazard. And it also includes 12 replacement trees, and the proposed new landscaping meets fire code requirements by being over 5 feet away from structures and meeting other requirements. They believe the site will be safer due to the removal of fire hazardous landscaping. And the Chris Jewell, the fire inspector,
yeah.
is here tonight to answer any questions that the council has about fire requirements specifically.
Can I just ask a quick question about the heritage trees? I did visit the lot, as Mayor Way said. Are the heritage trees the ones that have the little silver tags on them? How? I know it's 50 inches
Yeah, we
in
probably could have
diameter.
had them flag it. They might all have a silver tag if they were identified for the plan. but-
Okay.
So let me see if it's obvious from my. There is, you were provided an arborist report that has the tree removal identified. And since there's a number of trees, they might have marked them all, any of them in the report with the tags. So even the smaller ones might be tagged with a number because that's what corresponds to the plan.
Okay.
Okay.
A lot of them are proposed, well, they're like a lot of the site trees are proposed for removal,
Mm-hmm.
with the exception of the ones that are kind of closer to Chevy's Chase.
Okay. So just to, any further things that you think are important at this time for us to?
I don't need to go over the floor plan if you don't need me to. It's essentially a four-bedroom residence. What I would like to point out is what the planning commission did look at, especially Commissioner Wagstaff, like how can it be reduced in
Right, I
size
saw
and would
that.
that matter? And for example, like this bedroom here and bathroom, be easy for them to take that off, but does it really make a difference in the design? They didn't think so.
But they did look at, the commissioners did look at that idea.
And then a large amount of this lower level is really predominantly below grade, again, causing the need for a lot of grading at the site, but
Yeah.
also reducing the mass of the site. And then the ADU, which I'll be honest, it's my least favorite part of the project. I think the project would look better without the ADU, just my personal opinion, but it's not something subject to your review.
Okay.
And so even if it wasn't part of this project, they could come in tomorrow and put it in and we would have to approve it.
Okay.
Not that I don't like ADUs, I just think this one, it does look rather
Yeah.
large at the street.
And was there ever any discussion of making the garage smaller? My understanding is a 2-car garage standard size is about 400 square feet, and this one's 560.
There
Has
was
that ever?
no discussion of that. It is larger than it needs to be for, 400 square foot would cover, and it also doesn't have to be there. Just would then reduce site parking if it wasn't there.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll hear from the appellants, but you did list some of their main concerns, and I think on page 6 or slide 12
Oh, yeah,
you-
let me-
in your
Yeah.
printout here, you did speak to many of them. You did speak to them in the staff report. Are there any of those that you want to pull out? We talked about grading quality, tree removal.
The site is compliant with the parking requirements. I did note there is going to be a traffic impact to the construction.
As all construction is.
Right. And there'll be a construction management plan to try to minimize the impacts of that. That would be reviewed by Public Works during the building permit stage.
That does not comply with zoning regulations. Can you speak to that?
So it does require variances from certain zoning regulations,
Yes.
which is fairly common for a hillside project.
This was our previous discussion.
Right.
Okay.
The floor exceptions are common for hillside projects. The other sites, the site above also needed setback variances to be constructed. So in staff's opinion, it's not an unusual amount. And then, for example, because the site is so steep, the natural state requirement is really high on this site.
Right. And to speak to the privacy bullet point there, it looks like most of the design faces outward to Chevy Chase.
So this is the elevation that's facing towards, I guess it wouldn't be directly towards Chevy Chase, but the most prominent side is this elevation. And it's not facing any close neighbors there, but you would probably be able to see the homes that are down below.
Down below.
On Chevy Chase. Right?
Yeah. But the three appellants, their homes are above this and beside this property.
Correct. So from the 29 Owlswood site, the adjacent neighbor, they would
Yes.
probably, I think they will
Mr.
see the
Reese.
most of it. There is landscape screening between it, but their house is also oriented a different direction. So they have fewer, at least according to plans that we have, fewer large windows that face this site,
Okay.
towards this site.
It's at the end of that at the end of the road,
Right.
and they're up
Have
to
a
the
little
left,
driveway to the
up the
right.
driveway up to the left. Okay.
But their house is not, yeah, it's, I wouldn't say it's really far away and perfectly screened.
No.
But the impacts seem fairly minimal.
And 231 and 29 are directly above, are
Uphill.
above and over a little
So they're
bit.
looking at,
They're looking down on.
fencing and the house, right? And then the roof deck, I mean, in general, upper level roof decks are a concern to planners because we know they could provide privacy impacts and look down on other sites, but there aren't that many residences that are that close to this structure but it does provide views, but they're also having fewer impacts by not having a large graded area on their site. So this does provide some level area for people to
Okay.
enjoy the outdoors.
And it doesn't look like it from the record that I didn't see some residents of Chevy Chase, which would be looked down on from this property. I don't know. I can't identify if any of them came to Planning Commission or expressed.
I don't
there.
believe we heard any concerns from anyone from that street.
Okay, well, they might come tonight, but we'll hear. Okay. And your suggestion or your staff recommendation in the last slide is deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission decision by approving Resolution 1925. And then you gave three alternatives.
Correct. So
Okay.
you have an alternative to approve the appeal in part and make recommendations such as changing any conditions of approval or requiring modifications to the design. If you approve the appeal, you could deny the project, and then we would recommend returning with additional findings. The city attorney may want to make some comments if you
Yeah.
were deciding to do that. And then you could always continue the hearing if you need more information on something or would like them to make some sort of revision that you'd like to review before making a decision on the project.
Okay, is everybody clear on that? Thank you for that. And we reserve the right to ask you more questions as we go along. Is there anything you want to add before we keep going? Okay. I hope that was clear for a lot of people. Now we will begin the process in which the appellants, who are the McKernans, the Ridgway, and the Reeses, who live at 223, 231, and 29. And the three homeowners did appeal, and I'd like to know who would like to be your spokesperson, or both of you. And you have 10 minutes, and you could reserve some time for later if you would like. We will let you speak, and then we'll be asking questions so we don't cut into your time, if that's okay with you.
Great, thank you.
And if you have questions of staff, just direct it towards me, and then we'll refer it to staff too.
Great.
Okay? Really appreciate you being here. Please identify yourself.
Sure, thank you very
And
much.
talk to us.
My name is Mike Reed.
You'll need to speak right into the microphone. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Mike Reese, with my wife Jennifer. We live at 223 Marina Vista, which is just to build on setting the, excuse me, the landscape. We sit.
You want to drink? Can we get you some water? We got some. All right.
We sit right above, and so when there was talk about privacy, not that this is my biggest concern, but just so that we have
I
all
understand.
the facts. Our house looks right down at the center of that property, so that roof deck will be looking down, and a lot of the trees that are being removed are currently in between our property and their property. And our house is on that same hill. It's also on pilings. We're on 20-foot pilings on there. And so, you're probably not hearing people from Chevy Chase because most of those people on the lower are all renters. They don't know. So anyhow, I am here. The heart of our concern, or our portion of the concern, really is around safety and integrity of the hill. And this is a hill that we live on, and a hill that will be severely impacted, seems like, by the amount of digging that's happening based on this project. And the Planning Commission process did not fully alleviate those concerns. And so I'm here today because I believe there are still a number of outstanding issues, many of which that have been already kind of brought up, that are still unresolved. And I'm asking your input to see that the level of due diligence, and I don't want to suggest for a moment, I know that there's been tons of due diligence to try to get this project in. I just think given what's at stake, our house is a very steep hill. Our house is sitting above that. The last thing anybody wants is that hill to lose its integrity and for some kind of, catastrophe disaster to happen. So I just think there's a couple of areas that I'm going to go through that just warrant a little more due diligence before the project gets approved. And as I said, those have been kind of stated, but I will just for the record kind of reiterate that. The first is this notion of, it feels like the geotechnical report is a little insufficient based on that, given the complexity of this kind of site, that the scope and detail of the project of this magnitude, you would think would require more than just one boring. It's not a huge piece of property, but the tilt of strata and things vary from place to place. And so given the scale of the proposed excavation, we believe a single set boring is inadequate for characterizing the subsurface conditions across the entire site. And at a minimal, before we do any work there, we would request that additional borings kind of take place, just to give everybody the confidence that the stability of that hillside can handle the project. The second area is almost kind of common sense. I mean, I from grade school, we were taught that the benefit of trees and the benefit of foliage is its root system and its ability to kind of provide stability in the hill. And taking 14 of those trees out, putting aside the privacy issues, has to diminish the stability of that hill. And have not, and I'm not an arborist, I'm not an engineer, but there was nothing in the Planning Commission process that kind of alleviated that fear that, hey, removing all these trees is going to have no impact on the stability of this hill. And so that's the second area that I would just love some clarification on. There does seem to be a lack of civil engineering studies on the stormwater management or stormwater management review. I live there. I see the amount of water that kind of falls, cascades down that hill on any time it rains, and it's pretty substantial. And it seems to date that there's no civil engineering studies or peer-reviewed hydraulic analysis that's been presented to kind of demonstrate that the surface and subsurface water are going to be controlled, during the construction, first of all, but then even after the construction. And so just having a little more confidence on that front would be nice to have. And then the last issue was also kind of raised. I was kind of blown away by two things: the lack of confidence in everybody, like exactly how much soil and land is being taken out of here. There was a lot of debate where this is kind of an estimate, it's not an exact science. And so that struck me as it's kind of, first of all, we know it's a substantial amount. And I would think that at a minimum, we should have a pretty concrete estimate on that. And more importantly, the other thing that concerned me even more was because there was talk about, well, let's make sure we adhere to that. There's no process in place that I heard on that night that kind of monitors that to make sure that, hey, if we agree to a certain amount, how do we know that's what's being taken out of the hill? And
So just to let you know, you're up, you've used 6 of the 10 minutes. So
No, I
just
did
to let your
Yep, no,
neighbor.
that was really my last point.
Thank you.
Was that, just making
And,
sure.
and acknowledging your very complete letter here. Sir?
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is John McKernan. I'm here with my wife, Fran.
Hi,
We-
John.
Hi, thank you. We live at 29 Owlswood,
Yes.
right adjacent to the development. Uh, Given the time constraints, I'll read some of the important things that I want
Okay.
to make record here, and building on what Mr. Candell said. This project requires 4 significant variances, 2 of which represent over 100% or double what is already in the code. The fact that the project requires multiple variances to city municipal codes raises a critical question. If zoning codes can be so easily bypassed, what is the purpose of having them in the first place? These codes are designed to ensure safety, sustainability, and compatibility with the surrounding environment. Granting exceptions undermines their intent and could set a dangerous precedent, potentially paving the way for unsafe and incompatible developments in the future. Applying them selectively or with no exceptions is unfair to those who rely on these regulations for the very purposes of what they're created to exist, such as why we live there to begin with. The variance would be completely out of character with the neighborhood, transforming the area one of spacious to overcrowding, as the structure would be crammed into a lot that cannot support it. One of the things that the Planning Commission failed to do in my mind is provide a clear rationale for granting a project that seeks multiple significant variances from established zoning and environmental construction codes. These regulations exist to ensure health, safety, and orderly development without a compelling public interest or hardship justification. Approving such deviations sets concerning precedents for future developments. How much time do I have left?
2 minutes, sir.
2 minutes. And
But-
just reiterate, just
And I'm
also.
sorry, just a reminder, if you wanted to save time for a rebuttal afterwards, that's
Sure.
2 minutes.
Okay. Parking is another big concern. There is 0 parking on Owlswood and very limited parking on Chevy Chase. The fact that additional, granted, there's a garage, but there is 0 parking. And in fact, most times where we live, it's very difficult to maneuver our way up when people do park on the street and leave enough room. There's only room, it's a one-way street almost that can very accommodate one car. And in the turnaround aspects too is very challenging. And at any rate,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much. So just to what I heard were the 6 primary issues, although and they are very similar to what your letter was. Number 1 was safety and the integrity of the hill, or from sliding, and the geotechnical issues. 2 was tree removal, the 14 trees that have been slated for removal, that questioning the stability of the hill should that happen. That was number 2. Stormwater management, what is the stormwater issue going to be? The hydrology of that hill, that was your 3rd, or your colleague. 4th was soil removal concern, of the quantity of soil removal, how much and the process of that. The 5th issue that you brought forward were the capacity of all the variances that were used, and your argument about the exceptions that were used with these variances. And then the last, number 6, was parking that you brought up. So thank you. I've written them down. So we know that those are your primary concerns. And that will be an opportunity for staff to address those and for the homeowner to address those too when they get a chance. Would it help you, Elise, now if we address some of those, or should we wait till here? Let's wait to hear from the Mr. Edwards or his representative. So thank you. Yeah, and would you, before you begin, do you have any question of us as far as this process is going?
No, I do not.
Okay, so the appellants, I mean, we're trying to be fair. They use 10 minutes. They still have over a minute, and they have 1 minute and 20 seconds left if they want to do a rebuttal. But I will give you 10 minutes, and if you would like to speak that entire time or bring up the property owner, Mr. Edwards?
I'm Mr.
You-
Edwards.
Oh, you are.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
Sorry.
My apologies. But I do know you do have a consultant or somebody with you. Oh,
Yeah, I'll get into that.
okay. So they can
open.
come up during that 10-minute period of
Okay.
time too. All right. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll read my statement. Hopefully sorry, I'm a little nervous, so
That's all right.
I'll try to get through it. Good evening, City Council. My name is Frank Edwards. My wife and I own the property at 21 Chevy Chase. She was here earlier, but
The
we have
kids
two
are little.
small kids and they got to go home and get some rest. So we're here today following the Planning Commission's approval of our architectural plans and their approval that we believe were based on thorough review and carefully considered considerations of all relevant facts. Accompanying me tonight to answer any specific questions you may have are key members of my project team. I have behind me Sarah Lockwood, who is a geotech engineer, and she worked on the project and did the reports there. Hopefully Elias Horat, who's the architect, should be on the Zoom call. And then I have Jason Bernstein, who's an advisor for me. And then also, as mentioned, there's the representative from the fire department that might be useful. Before addressing the appeal, I do want to express my sincere appreciation for the diligent work and support of the planning department, the Central Marin Fire Department, and the Public Works Department. Over the past 2 years, they have worked collaboratively with our team to develop a design that not only respects the unique characteristics of our property, but also complies with the city's building requirements and the surrounding landscape. This has been a complex undertaking, given the shape, slope, and location of the lot, and given that this is a new construction project. However, we are confident that in the thoroughness and compliant design that has been achieved through this collaborative process. Furthermore, we have actively listened and incorporated reasonable requests and modifications suggested by our planning partners and engaged neighbors. Most recently, these include reducing the square footage and footprint of the home, reducing earthwork and hardscaping, setting back the second level of the main home, designing additional landscaping to address concerns of privacy and soil erosion. And as well, I talked to the project artist about reducing some of the trees that were being asked to remove. While we understand and respect that our neighbors have the right to appeal, we believe their numerous concerns have been thoroughly addressed and carefully evaluated by the Planning Commission, the city staffs, and the city's engineering consultants. The unanimous approval of the Planning Commission underscores their confidence in this project, adhering to all the applicable regulations and its compatibility with the neighborhood. Excuse me. We are concerned that further delays to this project, particularly as we approach the rainy season and our contractor's scheduling constraints, could lead to significant financial repercussions and extend the timeline considerably. Ultimately, my wife and I are committed to being responsible homeowners and contributing members of the Larkspur community. We are actively involved as parents in our children's schools and supporting the teachers and fundraising for the PTA. Additionally, for the past decade, I have volunteered with the Guardsmen in San Francisco, dedicating my time and expertise to support at-risk youth through campership and school scholarships. With this same spirit of community in mind, we approach this project intending to be good neighbors and make multiple attempts to communicating with those now appealing. While we've had productive conversations with some, including Mr. Reese, we've been disappointed. We are disappointed that we could not address everyone's concerns beforehand. We respectfully ask that the City Council uphold the Planning Commission's well-considered approval and allow us to move forward with building our family home. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Would you like to break? You still have 5 minutes and 53
I'll
seconds. You
relinquish
want
my time.
You want to reserve that or have your consultants? Okay. The hands raised of your consultant online, do you need them to speak?
I'd like to.
It's up to you if you want to use your time to do that.
Yeah, go right ahead, Elias.
Oh, I was, can everyone hear me all right?
Yes. Could you please introduce yourself? And you have about 5 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yep, I won't need that at all. We'll save our time definitely. My name is Elias. I am the project architect on this. I am not the geotechnical engineer or the civil engineer, but I am the design architect who's been working with Frank on this project. I really quickly, thanks Frank for sharing that great overview. This has been a very, complex project. Frank has been reaching out from everyone, including neighbors to the fire department for years working on this project, and listening to every single person. And it is a lot of different conflicting information that we have to come together and decide how to work with. I just quickly, and I don't want to use all of our time, but I quickly wanted to speak to a couple of the items that were brought up. We are not purposefully removing any trees or any privacy. Of course, if it was up to us, we would leave these. We are removing trees for fire safety. That is the only reason that we are doing this. We are also replanting with fire safety trees and bushes in their place. I won't speak to any geotechnical issues as I feel like we might dive into that a little bit more. Then I also wanted to speak to civil just a little bit to say that we are in the preliminary or we're in the planning stage. We aren't in the detailed drawing stage, which I know is a issue that's coming up over and over. And I know the planning department can speak to this as well, that there's a very thorough review that's going to happen with the building department. These plans are not going to be built off of tomorrow. They will be reviewed by many different engineers, including fire safety, life safety, total structural safety, and geotechnical engineering. So I understand that there might be frustration from neighbors on some of these items being preliminary, but we are at the planning phase of this, and those details will be sought out. And then I'll save the rest of our time as well.
Thank you. Sure, come on up and introduce yourself, please.
Hello, Jason Bernstein, friend and advocate
All right.
of Mr. Edwards. I just want to add 3 clarifying points as well. In regards to the setback, it's my understanding that the home itself is compliant with the setbacks. It's an exterior stairway that will serve for one purpose in emergency situations for the broader community. That is requiring that setback, and I believe that was requested by the fire department. Second, I want to just respond that this is not actually establishing any new precedent, that the neighbors themselves live in homes that have established this precedent in the past. And Mr. Edwards is simply asking you to apply that same logic to his parcel. I know I said 3, but I'll hold it at that for now. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Edwards, anything else? You have 2.5 minutes left, or you can reserve it for later.
I was a little nervous there. We do have civil engineering plans that did address drainage and all that. They are preliminary, but there was thorough investigation that we do have civil plans that weren't reviewed very thoroughly during the last planning commission, but they were there for neighbors to view and inspect if they chose to.
Okay, thank you. Good time, you guys kept him under a reasonable amount of time. Elise, is there any of these matters that you want staff to further, or we can ask you to further clarify? Okay, yes. Of the concerns that were both expressed by the appellant and Mr. Edwards, I'm saying the appellant as kind of a group because there's 3 of you. Are there any of those that you would like clarification and get?
Yeah, that'd be great. So I guess it's the stability, the hill integrity that stands out to me as a issue I'd love to understand better. So Herzog did their report, and I read through the letter. My understanding is they did one boring and they found the shallow sandstone. And also, there's some exposed area. It looks like it's down at the base. There's shallow substance. So one would interpolate that the whole thing could be, but it could also not be. So my question is, having read it, and then also it refers to a July 17th peer review response, which doesn't seem part of our packet. Long story short, do we need to do more investigation? Question 1. And 2 is it sounded like the letter was saying, upon construction, they may find that it doesn't have that same, substrate or stability. Would that change the permitting at all, or how does this work?
So our consultants they didn't recommend they do more. So I'm not a geotechnical engineer either, but there's none of the experts that we're relying for to review this project are indicating more boring should be done. And that's also based on just the way the site has been in there's nothing on the site that's indicating there's something more that needs to be investigated. I'm, as staff member, I'm comfortable with the experts that have provided opinions about the soil stability and the foundation design. They're going to be inspecting throughout the foundation construction, and changes would be made if they discover something unusual. But in one thing that geotechnical engineers usually say if they're at these hearings is it's going to be more stable when there's something built there, because right now there's nothing holding up the hill at all. When they do this, there's going to be an engineered foundation that's holding up part of the hillside too. So it's not changing existing conditions except to stabilize the hillside.
Oh, that's helpful. Sorry, just two minor things. So, I mean, in the report, I'm saying, although additional borings, this is on page 129 of our packet, although additional borings would provide additional substrate information, we judge this information will also be obtained as part of the construction inspections required in item 2. It's just, the feel of it is we're not done yet. So when you say rely on the experts, I'm not an engineer either, but I'm sort of reading we're not done yet, with our assessment.
The building official says that he's happy to speak.
Great.
Yeah.
And then I was gonna say too, if you were to require additional borings just to get more assurance, you could make that a condition of approval so that if it turns out everything's the same, it doesn't have to return.
Okay.
Introduce yourself, please, to.
Sure thing. Bill Hansel, I'm the chief building official. I was listening in and thought I might be able to add something. As part of the building permit itself, there will be a requirement to submit the structural engineer drawings, which will be much more detailed, including references to geotechnical reports and other reports that the structure is based upon. We review those and we require special inspections. We require any additional information that we feel is necessary. And then during the construction itself, we also require inspections in process to make sure that that the conditions are addressed in situ. So I just wanted you to be aware of the fact that it's naturally not a part of the planning approval to do that scope of work because it is so much more extensive prior to a planning approval.
So that's really helpful. So that's further down the road. But Bill, in your opinion, what might you find on that lot that would actually deem, the integrity of the hill to be at risk, with this construction?
Well, usually it would be dependent upon a further investigations by the geotech or the structural engineer that would call out things that would require that if during construction something is revealed that's not expected, like borings would have to be made or footings taken deeper, that is something that would be covered by the process. I'm not sure I can give you more specifics relative, but that's typically. You don't find, the only thing that you might find would be a condition during construction or just prior to construction, which would require substantially more expense and cost, which then would be consideration to the feasibility of the project at that point.
Okay.
But it's not like it'd be rare to find something that couldn't be engineered. It would be a matter of cost.
Okay, thank you very much.
Scott.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question on that. I am trying to understand why. I mean, in my experience, you want to map out as much as you can before you start, find all the problems so that you can make intelligent decisions of whether it's worth going forward or what the cost is going to be. Why would we give a permit without knowing all that information and saying, well, we'll figure it out later, and then maybe we're going to find out something that's bad and we'll deal with it? Wouldn't we want to know that up front?
Ideally, but the expense of having to go to that level of detail usually is prohibitive when it might not even be approved from a planning sense. So usually it's a sequential thing of saying like, well, conceivably this is doable, and conceivably having worked on a bunch of projects myself as an architect and overseeing other ones. It's none of those types of problems are insurmountable. It's a matter of cost, which again, if it gets to if there's a planning approval and then during the further design of it or the construction of it, you run into problems, that's naturally going to stop the project, but or at least contribute to a lot more expense. But again, that's something that usually that's separate than just the planning approval. I've just never seen an ability to be able to go that far.
Okay, could you reassure me that the local government's engineering department, our building department is going to be monitoring this to make sure it is safe, that there's some oversight? You know, I guess my concern is you hear the concerns of the neighbors. They're going to start drilling and pulling out trees, and all of a sudden the hill is going to come tumbling down.
Sure.
You know, and while I respect privately retained experts, you know, a lot of the time, in my experience, those experts
Have
may
influence.
have incentives to have certain outcomes. And the incentive of our city is to be safe. And I would like somebody with that incentive to be involved in this project to a point where they're, you know, requiring what's required and monitoring what's happening. And I just want to feel comfortable that that's kind of the process.
I understand. I don't want to make any misrepresentations, legal counsel and city manager here. But I mean, I will state that our whole process is based upon compliance, ensuring compliance with the building code, and the building code has, you know, factors of safety beyond what, you know, is just at failing point. So through the following the building code and then our review of those structural drawings and the geotechnical drawings, we do as much as we can to make sure that they're complying with that level of safety. And then during the construction process, we're also doing inspection. So it's again another eye on that process, both in terms of it, you know, physically being there and seeing, but also in terms of receiving the documents that are making sure that the construction itself is proceeding according to the way that we approved it and the way that it was designed.
Okay.
Would you agree that the exceptions being made to the regulations, the what we're allowing the variances to be, are not safety related? And I mean, some of them are related. We have ordinances based on slopes and things like that.
Right.
That the variances that we're making in this particular case don't have an effect on the safety or integrity of the hill. That's not the purpose of those ordinances.
Well, yes, exactly. It's just the safety issues are taken into consideration and by the building code, not necessarily the zoning code, you know, per se. And so they're addressed as part of that second half of the process. And there are so many conditions that are dealt with, whether it has to do with, you know, drainage, slope retention, you know, structural stability of a house, not just in regular gravity loads, but also like during an earthquake, right?
Yeah.
That you know, as Elise was commenting, an engineered design that's properly executed and properly overseen by the city is all there to address those very things.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, Sky, you have a
I
microphone.
was going to make two brief points. One is that accepting your concerns about third-party consultants, the city does have its own geotechnical engineer peer review the report, and they submitted comments, and those were addressed in the final report. The city also would also have peer reviewed any future geotechnical work that was done for the project. And then this is just a point of information to keep in mind about it, is that the geotechnical engineers have put their stamp on the report. They are basically at risk for any errors that they may make in the course of doing the assessment and calculations. Same would be true for the civil engineers doing design. You know, there are design and engineering liabilities that they have to face. So it's not, while they may have motivations in regard to get the client what they want, they also have motivations to ensure that they're able to continue to practice their profession.
Thank you.
Okay, this is a lot of material, and it's also a public hearing. So there's an opportunity for members of the public who are in the room to express their opinion or ask questions. And if there is anyone, could you please come forward and to the microphone? No, we've already done public comment on other items in Larkspur about an hour, 2 hours ago. So you missed it. Sorry, no, we're right on, we're behind time on a lot of things. So this is the public hearing for a planning commission appeal. So you may step to the microphone, please, introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes. And then I will go to public comment on the Zoom call. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Way. Thank you, council members. My name is Philip Harris. I live on Francis Avenue, and I'm one of the appellants in the 64 Francis appeal, which is going to be coming before you on June 4th.
So, sir,
may I continue? Because this relates specifically to the 21 Chevy appeal. May I continue? I'm here tonight because the case before you, as Mr. Candell has pointed out, 21 Chevy raises many of the same concerns: excessive FAR, major grading, removal of heritage trees, and a request to override the clear limits of the zoning code. I want to say this plainly. I don't think these decisions are just about individual projects anymore. I think we're watching the city's zoning framework slowly unravel, not through code amendments, but not through public debate, but through exceptions, one by one. And tonight, I'm asking you to draw a line. The city has a thoughtful zoning code. It's not perfect, but it's the product of real deliberation. Residents rely on it when buying homes, remodeling, or weighing what will be built next door. And when the Planning Commission repeatedly approves homes that are double or triple the allowable FAR, it sends the message that those rules are optional, that if you ask for enough exceptions, you might just get them. And we know what happens next. Everybody starts asking. That's not sustainable. It's not fair to the neighbors who follow their rules, to the heritage trees that don't grow back, and to the long-term integrity of our neighborhoods. I urge you to reverse the Planning Commission's approval here. It's not just about Chevy Chase. It's about restoring faith that the rules in Larkspur still matter. And if they need to change, we'll do it the right way, through a public process, not by exception. The Planning Commission evidently is concerned about this. They have a subcommittee to address this very issue. This project should be put on hold until that process is completed. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the chambers who would like to address us on this matter of the Planning Commission appeal? Yes, ma'am.
I'm here with Mr. Edwards. I'm Sarah Lockwood. I'm with the Geotechnical Engineering Company, and I guess I kind of thought that you would want to ask me questions on to try to address some of the appellant's specific geotechnical specific concerns.
Do we have anybody who would like to? So he reserved about 2 minutes of his time left.
Okay.
So
Do you want to speak to those then? Okay.
do you have questions for him?
I was just going to say, I asked the other geotechnical expert that was in the room. Those are the questions I was going to ask you. If you want to address them, they would be the same ones. The concern is about, the integrity of the hill, and do we really know enough right now? And why are we not doing the additional testing to feel confident before we start embarking on a project?
Right. Well, I agree with what the.
So to be fair
Oh.
to both, I mean, he did reserve some time. So we'll give you 2 minutes because he's still in his time frame. So
Okay.
just to be fair to everyone.
Okay. So I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but the building department.
Bill.
Said, I would reiterate that we're in the design and planning phase, and some of that we say, what if change conditions are encountered during construction, that's always a statement that's made. That's always on the table. It's not that we're saying we didn't do enough and we'll just do it later. That's just something that's kind of always on the table, and it's always in the limitations section of a report like this. But I'll just tick through since I have limited time, because I know some of the specific concerns I can speak to. So the closeness of the uphill residents to this project. on page 2 of our report update, we state, and this is always in there, that we can consult on if surcharge loads are going to be applied to the retaining wall. That's something that can be worked out with us and the structural engineer if it's deemed necessary. That's just, of course, you don't have my little aid up there, but Frank might have given it to you. The lateral distance of the uphill foundations, which I hear tonight, it's on drilled piers. The lateral distance of that to the cut and retained cut that's going to be made can be easily looked at and made sure that either it's not too close, or if it is within a certain distance, we design the wall for extra loads. The tilt of the strata has come up a few times. That's not something that's considered with retained cuts. That's something that's more consideration when you have like an unretained highway cut, where you have to consider the intersection of like joints and bedding and the cut you're going to make. Oh, that's my time?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Sure. But I'm here for questions.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, Catherine, I'm going to ask if you would permit it. These are questions that I would have asked.
Okay.
And I would like to hear the answer. So I know we're at the 10 minutes, but instead of counting it as presentation time, this would be a question and answer time.
Okay.
I would have asked these questions.
All right. And with that caveat, then in fairness, if the appellants have additional material they'd like to present, you may also, but. So let's,
Just anybody, another 2 minutes, something like that. Is
Yeah.
that sufficient?
Ask me specifically.
why don't
No,
you?
you're answering all, you're rattling through the questions that I have, which is why I kind of wanted to keep going, because these are questions I'm concerned about.
Okay, yeah, so the tilt of the strata, not a thing. You know, we can absolutely do more borings if you decide. I can tell you from my extensive experience in Marin County and with this sandstone in particular, the other borings are gonna be the same. Like, we had 2 feet of weak soil, and then the sandstone, that's a really consistent formation out there. There's no indications on the surface that there's going to be something different. There's no topography indicating that there's any landslides other than the obvious ones down at Chevy Chase Court, which we did speak to. That's indicating what the surface soil does at the surface when it's saturated and it's over steep. So those road cuts are much steeper than the slope itself, which is performing really well under the cover of grass. And where those areas are going to be cut, they're going to be retained or covered by impervious. So I'm not concerned as the geotech, I'm not concerned about the cut destabilizing the hillside. It's going to be retained. The bedding is not going to be exposed to be able to slide out. And just my engineering judgment in general for the area, knowing it very well, is that we can do more borings and they'll probably be really similar.
So do you have a question of hers?
Yeah, I do. I just, it was mentioned that the removal of the trees, of the tree roots stabilize the hill.
Right.
Can you, removing 14 trees, is that going to cause any
So
destability?
the trees are a double-edged sword, and like the fire has assessed them as being a fire hazard. But the other thing to consider, and I'm not an arborist, but if you cut down the trees and leave the stumps and the root systems are going to provide some root cohesion for a number of years until they rot. If you choose to cut down the trees and remove the stumps, those voids would need to be compacted. Windfall, I've seen a lot of trees cause landslides by falling over and the root bulbs coming up and then destabilizing, some deeper soil. But the grasses that are there, those only provide a few inches of root cohesion. That's pretty minor. And you can see what the soil does on steeper slopes down at Chevy Chase. But that can be controlled with things like jute netting or other considerations. So the trees coming out, I am not an arborist, so I don't know what the root systems of those particular trees are doing. But they can, I can't say it's good or bad. I can say there's ways to deal with the fact that trees are coming out. One way is they may be taking up extra water that's in the slope. Sometimes you cut down trees and then suddenly you have springs popping out because you didn't know there was more water there. We didn't have water in our boring, but all these cuts are going to be drained. All the retaining walls that go up to support those cuts will have back drains. So any water that's not uptaken by the trees anymore will have a way to safely get out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Do you want me to sit?
Yes,
Okay,
please,
thanks.
because we still have public comment online. Anyone else in the room with public comment on this matter? Yes, ma'am. Please introduce
Thank you
yourself.
for your time.
Sure.
My name is Lori Kimball, and I'm a resident of 23 Owlswood Drive.
Yes, you.
And I live next door to the McKernans. John McKernan spoke. I am very concerned about traffic and safety. We have 5 small children on our street. The parking is outrageous. There is no parking. We have 2 cars in my home. It's very hard to even get off of our driveway because of the traffic going the one-way street. I just wanted to reiterate that. I know it was discussed already, but it is definitely an issue and something that really needs to be taken into great consideration.
Okay.
Thank you.
No one else in the chambers. Okay, so we'll go to our online team. Allison, I see one hand raised, or is that a residual hand? Oh, Mr. Holmes, join us,
James
please.
Holmes.
You have
James
3
Holmes
minutes,
speaking.
James.
Yes, Larkspur, 2 points. Number one, regarding the tree removal, since the Larkspur Climate Action Plan requires preservation of mature trees to the extent possible, if the removal of these trees is not absolutely necessary for the proposal, i.e. in the building footprint, and if it's not absolutely mandatory, as opposed to merely advisory for fire protection, then I believe the trees should be retained. My second point, I didn't hear any substantial evidence supporting the extra-large garage, but let alone any need for it. In fact, I thought I heard it wasn't discussed at all below. But if the extra-large size bears on the concerns of the appellants, such as excavation or mass or trees, then I don't think there's any substantial evidence for the extra size. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. No one else online with their hand raised, so I think we've heard sufficient comment. So I will close the public comment period of time and bring it back to the council to see if there are further questions of staff before we have a discussion.
Just a real quick one.
Sure.
I think we have a fire person in the room, and my question is just
There was a letter also submitted in the packet, right? From, yeah.
correct. But I'm wondering if we were just doing defensible space, would these trees be removed?
Wait, hold on. We need a microphone, or you got to come up. Why don't you come forward because you're in an official uniform, so you're allowed. And I do realize that there was a 2-page statement in the packet from the Central Marin Fire.
Yeah, that's correct. My name is Chris Jewell. I'm the fire inspector for the Central Marin Fire Department. So for any new development, we do require complete compliance with the vegetation management codes and standards. Most of those you'll find in Chapter 49 of the Fire Code. Part of that standard is the removal of all hazardous vegetation on the property. Up to 200 feet, depending on topography. When we looked at the plan, I believe most of the trees in questions were California bay trees. I don't believe any redwoods were proposed as removal for this. And so that's typically a requirement for all projects.
So they're considered hazardous and they would have to be removed
And
for
also
any
big
construction, whether it has appeal or not.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I actually would like confirmation that no redwoods, were considered for removal, because that's not the way I read the Arbor report. I read that a couple of them are heritage trees and are going to be removed. So if somebody could clarify that for me.
I don't see any redwoods proposed for removal on the plan or in the tree removal plan.
Originally, we were going to have a couple redwoods removed in order to make the driveway comply with the turnaround standard. However, based on the access issues already present on the site, we didn't feel that was necessary since our access is going to be from Chevy Chase.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know you're on the agenda later, so. All right, I've closed the public hearing from public comment after we've heard from all the parties involved. And if there are no further questions of our staff, I would like someone to start the conversation about where they're leaning in this. We were given from our staff sort of several options. Deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's decision by approving Resolution 1925, or alternatively, continue the hearing, approve appeal in part and require modifications, or 3, approve the appeal and deny the project. That sounds like what our options are. So Scott sounds like he's got an idea.
Okay, first of all, thank you everyone it was very educational, and we all appreciate it. I started with a lot of the same concerns as the appellants. As far as the safety goes, the integrity of the hill was one of my main concerns. And after hearing from Sarah as well as Bill, it's Bill, right? Okay. I feel comfortable. I feel comfortable that we're at the very beginning of the process, and that the city will be working with the other engineers to ensure that this is safe. I have a separate concern, which I raised in the beginning, which was raised by one of the comments, which is, why do we keep doing exceptions? I don't, it's okay. If we're going to say our zoning code doesn't matter, then let's just say our zoning code doesn't matter, and anyone who wants an exception can get an exception and be done with it. I mean, I get it. I don't think it's a safety issue, so I don't have a problem granting an exception. I don't think it's in the communities. It's dangerous to grant the exception in this particular case, but on some level, it just feels silly, and so again, whether this is the particular project that we draw a line or not, at some point, I think we have to modify our codes and just enforce them and say, if there's a hill, this is how we're going to deal with it, as opposed to, take it one property at a time, because then we really don't have any standards and we're really not necessarily treating everybody equally. And that's my concern.
Yeah, I hear that. And I mean, that now you're putting like a jury nullification argument forward, but that is definitely something that I think as a council, we could work with our planning commission and our staff to refine these variance exceptions that are written into our system now, that have been there for a long time. I think they've been there probably since the codes were written in the 70s, and some of them. What are anybody else's thoughts from Scott's initial introduction of his ideas? So it sounds like you're comfortable with the planning commission's decision as written.
I am comfortable with the decision as far as safety issues, and that the project will be monitored by the city. As far as whether we should grant an exception just because we are allowed to, I'm not sure how I feel about that. And I'm happy to hear people's perspective on that, but my concern is just granting an exception to everybody who asks for an exception is a potential problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to state my opinion.
Sure.
I am going to deny the appeal. First, I think there's been a comprehensive review by the Planning Commission and by staff, by geotechnical experts, and by the staff's or the city's geotechnical experts, and by Public Works. I feel that this project has undergone multiple layers of review. I appreciate the experts here in the room. I think, Central Marine Fire, the geotechnical experts, our staff here. Nothing is ever certain until you embark on the project. And I think that there's been a lot of diligence that has been done here. Yes, it's a steep lot, but when I look at the floor area ratio study that is on page 106 of this packet, there are at least 35 other parcels in the neighborhood, including some of the appellants' parcels, where these homes would not have been built but for a variance to our existing code. So I don't find that that's a fair way to say that these people were able to build homes, and yet we are going to deny this homeowner the ability and right to build, his family home. I agree with you. We need to have a discussion on, if we want with Planning Commission, but right now, this is what we have and this is what we're working with. And other people have been, and I drove up to Marina Vista Avenue. That is extremely steep. The lots up there, I mean, those homes up there are on pilings. They absolutely would not have been built, but for, variances that were granted by the city. I want to address the parking issues. I think that, yes, Owlswood is, it's a very narrow street. However, look, we have a single family home. There will be 4 parking spaces with this single family home. I think that that they've made an attempt, more than an attempt, so that, they're not utilizing street parking. And I think that's good for the neighbors. I think the fact that they're putting in the staircase for fire access, again, I think, that also will benefit the neighbors because they won't have the emergency vehicles going on Owlswood. It'll be going on Chevy Chase. So I think that, the homeowner in this instance has made accommodations to the extent possible. He's also, I don't view an 1,800 square foot home as a gigantic home. That's, I think, a modest sized home in this day and age. And so I am ready to deny the appeal and grant the variances.
Okay, Sarah, any thoughts?
Yeah, well, thank you everybody for your time and all of the information provided. I have similar concerns with regards to the city's exception process, and I know that that's not necessarily relevant to this, but I do feel that, these exceptions are constantly being handed down, and we are eroding the framework for our zoning and permitting. So there are potentially some modifications that I feel could help resolve some of the concerns of the appellants that would not require too much more time or delay to the project. And some of those might be changing, say, the process for the excavation, monitoring of the excavation process, making sure that there's an understanding of how that would be monitored, and potentially revisiting the garage size to, decrease the size of that a little bit. I don't know what the ramifications of that would be. I don't want to kill the project altogether. I want this family to have an opportunity to build on a lot that they've purchased and understand or feel more reassured by what I've heard, and reassured by the fact that there will be further geotechnical engineering reports and structural reports done during the process, the building process. So that gives me comfort to know that there, unfortunately, as was mentioned by Councilmember Andre, there are always uncertainties, and until you get into the business of building the home, that's when you determine that potentially there may need to be a larger excavation done. And at that point, I think we have in the resolution a plan to come back to commission for approval. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gabe, anything that's different from what's been expressed?
Yeah, just with a slight twist, I'll
Put your
keep
mic
it up to
on,
one.
please.
I'll keep it under 1 minute. I mean, I think most of what has been said is what I've been thinking. I tried to put myself really in the mind of 223 Marina Vista, Mike Reese, and thinking, here's my home. Is it going to slide down the hill? And honestly, I think this isn't just a geotech or an arborist, it's both, because you have rooting that probably goes through the sandstone, and that could, that integrity could be compromised. I'm not an engineer. I'm assuming retaining walls can mitigate, and I'm assuming that, I've learned a lot about the process tonight, that, this is just to express the ability to go forward to the next stage. And if real soil instability and hillside, landslide is possible, it's got to be remediated. So having faith in that, I'm inclined to deny the appeal. I also think that the variance issue that, Councilmember Candell brought up is real. On the other hand, every code in California allows for hardship. So you have a norm, and if you build on these weird hillsides, that's why you have variances. So I don't have as many problems as my fellow council members do, but I'm inclined to let the building go forward.
So I'm hearing three council members would like to deny the appeal. The conversation that Sarah just had of wanting to decrease the garage size and the second point you had, is anybody in support of moving that forward, or are we comfortable with the decision that the Planning Commission has already made regarding that? Because that will open up Sky, are we allowed to, that would be a change that would have to then go back to a Planning Commission situation.
I think if you could include a condition that said reduce the garage to 400 square feet. Just
Okay.
because I'm saying that hypothetically because the number was expressed. It would then be up to the applicants and their consultants to basically revise the plans to conform to that prior to issuing a building permit for it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't necessarily have to go back to the Planning Commission if you conditioned it that way. For the other issues that Councilmember Margulies mentioned, those are all things that staff are going to do anyway.
Right.
But we could include a condition to say that basically the final geotechnical engineering will be peer reviewed by a city expert and monitored during the course of construction.
So I hear your point about reducing it, but I don't think I hear support that we want to open up a whole new design review process for a garage reduction, unless somebody
Yeah,
else.
I think there were 9
Yeah.
appellant concerns. Garage size
Was not one of them.
Yeah.
So I concur with my council members as to the process that's gone on. I appreciate the appellant's concerns, and I feel, sir, why don't we can we hold on that? Yes, thank you. That the needs have, that the property owner has really addressed much of the safety needs and concerns, and then going forward, that the city has a plan to continue that process. So I am also inclined to deny the appeal. So at this point, I will take a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Yeah.
And just to clarify, this would be a motion to approve the
Planning-
resolution presented by staff.
Yes. So could you rephrase that then, Gabe? So move.
Yeah,
it-
I move that we deny the appeal and approve the
Resolution
resolution.
1925.
Resolution 1925 approved by staff.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
I would just like to abstain.
Okay. Abstention, no opposition and one abstention. The matter is closed and the appeal has been denied.
And I'm sorry, just for staff, at some point, can we bring that to on our agenda to discuss the process of
Yes.
of how we're going to handle exemptions and things like that moving forward? Is that
I
fair?
think that's something we're definitely have an interest in.
And, would you like the planning commission to go through that first?
I'll talk with the city manager about that and we'll figure out a strategy.
Thank you.
Okay, this moves us to item 7.2. Would anybody like to take a 5-minute break, or do we think 7.2 is going to take a long time? No. So if we don't mind, can we push forward with the next 2 and then we'll take a 5-minute break? Yours is short also, I know. So that brings us to public hearing 7.2. Please join us. Introduction of Ordinance 1085, designing fire hazard severity zones and local responsibility area. Could I have a staff report, please? And then we'll open up the public hearing.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. As mentioned, I'm Chris Jewell, the fire inspector for the Central Marin Fire Department. As mentioned, we'll be introducing and conducting the first reading of Ordinance 1085, designating the fire hazard severity zones in the local responsibility area. If introduced, the second reading and adoption of the ordinance will follow at the May 21st, 2025 council meeting.
Could you bring the mic closer to you because their audience is struggling?
Sorry.
That's all right. Technology.
To give some background on the ordinance, in 2021, CAL FIRE was tasked with identifying moderate and high fire hazard severity zones, along with the already identified very high areas in the local responsibility area. The local responsibility area, or LRA for short, are those where the local jurisdiction has the primary responsibility for fire protection. These maps were created by CAL FIRE under the direction of the state fire marshal without local jurisdictional input or influence. These maps are developed using a science-based and field-tested model that assigns a hazard score based on the multiple factors such as fire history, fuel load in the area, weather, and topography, with two elements in mind: the probability of an area burning and expected fire behavior under extreme fuel and weather conditions. These maps were published on February 24th, 2025, and the California Government Code Section 51179 mandates that the local agencies shall designate by ordinance these fire hazard severity zones within 120 days of receiving recommendations from the state fire marshal. To point your attention to the screen, can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. The blue areas on the screen are the existing designated wildland urban interface areas. Those were designated in 2011. I don't know the ordinance number off top. And then the yellow areas are the newly designated moderate hazard severity zones, with a small portion of very high being designated in open space shown in red on the map. Similar to the current designated WURI areas, the new areas in yellow will be subject to requirements found in Chapter 7A, as well as Chapter 49 in the California Fire Code. In total, approximately 330 parcels will be included in this zone that were not already included in the wildland urban interface areas. As a brief summary, the new maps came out in February this year and have to be adopted within 120 days per state law. There is no effect to the vast majority of people who are already in the designated wildland urban interface, with an added 330 parcels that will need to comply with current defensible space and fire resistant construction requirements. With that, I'm available for questions from the council.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Are there questions the council has of this?
No.
CAL FIRE required map by the state? No? Yes, Severity? Yeah.
Well, just real quick, I mean, these designations, we accept them, but what are the consequences or, ramifications of being very high versus moderate?
So they're, in terms of requirements from the code, they're the same. The only difference is the way that CAL FIRE rates them in terms of hazard. So they rate the actual hazard, so the fire itself and where it's going to affect, versus the WUI area is more of a geographical area that's designated based on local conditions, such as topography, climate, fuel loading, structures, things like that. So that's really the only difference.
Okay, so I guess to homeowners, like what would we see any difference if we were in the very high versus moderate versus, essentially no difference?
We don't really know,
We don't,
right?
we just sort of,
so-
it's just designations in terms of for CAL FIRE for your purposes, basically.
Yeah, so
Okay,
the difference is that now they're gonna have to comply with 7A and Chapter 49. What that includes is that when they develop, redevelop, and do modifications, they'll have to meet a certain level of standard for the type of materials they're using. For a new home, typically, when looking at some numbers, the cost increase is about 10 to 12%, just because they have to use certain rated windows, siding, roof type, things like that. So
So this is a public hearing. I'm opening the public hearing. Is there anyone in the chambers who would like to ask a question about this? Mr. Mueller, please come forward. We are discussing ordinance for the fire hazard safety zones and local responsibility
Thank
area.
you. David Mueller, I live here in Larkspur. So I was very interested in this item. I've been sort of waiting for some definitive information about fire safety zones and so on. And there's something in here that just, at least on my read, seems to be in conflict, two parts of it. So I assume you all have this there.
Yeah.
But this map, the color map that's in here, shows a very large part of Larkspur. And this map's titled Fire Hazard Severity Zones, and it lists 3 colors here. Red is very high. And in fact, right above where the colors are, it says Fire Hazard Severity Zones. Very high is red, high is orange, yellow is moderate. Okay, great. So then I look at the very next page in the report. It is titled Master Fire Safety, and it's right out of the Larkspur Municipal Code.
Right.
And if you look at the very first section there, 1410.010, definition, very high fire hazard severity zones. Exactly the same category that the map is titled. And here it shows all those areas that are in yellow as being very high fire hazard severity zones. I mean, you can just look at sub-item A. It says the area west of Magnolia Avenue from Corte Madera city limits north to the Kentfield Marin County boundary is in the very high fire hazard severity zones. And yet on the map, it shows that exact same area listed as moderate fire hazard severity zones. So I don't really get it. It just seems like there's something inconsistent there. Is it moderate or is it very high? And there just seems to be a significant incompatibility there that I think if somehow that exists, it should be explained because it just seems very incompatible to me. Thank you.
Okay. Hold on, hold that. No, not you. You can. It's a public hearing. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to address the matter so that we can have all the questions answered? No. Is there anyone online who has a question regarding this item? I don't see any hands raised. Okay, so I'll close public comment. Can you answer that question?
Yes, I can. So on page 2, if you look at the 3rd paragraph from the bottom,
Yes.
the original fire hazard severity zone maps released in 2007 impose mandatory construction and defensible space requirements only on parcels identified as very high. However, the only areas within the city of Larkspur that were identified as being in a very high hazard severity zone by CAL FIRE were located at the end of Madrone, which included 3 parcels at the very back of Madrone. As a response to that, the city of Larkspur adopted the ordinance. Earlier they adopted the ordinance Master Fire Safety under Chapter 14.10 within the Larkspur Municipal Code, so that those can apply those restrictions to those areas.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
I think I got most of that, but I trust you.
Yeah, and so I do agree that we need to revise that section.
Okay.
14.02 should be titled wildfire or wildland urban interface areas, because that's really what that area that's described that you had mentioned is applying to. I think that was just a remnant of an old ordinance that we.
I got it. So in tonight, if we approve this, can we add that addendum to change the wording in that particular part of the code, or do we have to come back with it? You've expired.
Remember what you heard. We're on a timeline that's prescribed by
Right.
the state. So we have plenty of time to reconcile our local ordinances as the state process reaches its conclusion.
Okay. Everybody feel comfortable with that? So just some semantics need to, or some terms need to change in our ordinance, but we can approve this CAL FIRE map as recommended. Okay, any other questions? Thank you. I will take a, what am I taking?
Motion.
A motion, that's it. For adopting ordinance 1085 designating, yeah.
So it'd be introduction and waiver of further reading.
Got it. Introduced and waived for.
I
further
will
reading.
make that motion.
Second, anyone?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? No? And no abstentions. Thank you. You may. You can stick around the rest of the night, but you've been here for 3 hours, so appreciate it. Our last public hearing item is 7.3, status of vacant positions as required by AB 2561. This is a public hearing. Can we have the Assistant City Manager's staff report?
Yes, good evening, Mayor Way, members of the City Council and the community. My name is Shannon O'Hare and I am the Assistant City Manager. Tonight, I have a brief staff report for this public hearing. The reason why we are bringing this item before the council and the community tonight is that we are legally required to do so. So AB 2561 was a new law adopted by the state of California and has gone into effect this year. It requires public agencies to report information regarding vacancy rates, recruitment, and retention efforts for their staff. The report must happen at least once per fiscal year and occur before the adoption of the next fiscal year budget. As you'll learn later tonight, we're in budget season and we'll be adopting our fiscal year budget shortly. This report must take the format of a public hearing and the agency must notify all employee and labor organizations of the public hearing. The main provision of this new law requires agency to report out on vacancy rate and provide any additional information regarding recruitment and retention efforts if vacancy rates in any one bargaining unit exceeds 20%. Larkspur has one bargaining unit, the Larkspur Miscellaneous Employee Association. Our vacancy rate in this unit is less than 20%, so we don't have anything additional to report in terms of metrics that are mandated this year. The law also requires us to report out on the state of recruitment and retention broadly, including naming any challenges to attracting or retaining talent, as well as any efforts to improve circumstances in these areas. So generally, Larkspur's greatest challenges to both recruitment and retention is one, the relatively high cost of living in the area, which often leads to 2, very long commutes. People love working here. They don't love how long it takes them to work here. I would like to note that these challenges are not unique to the city of Larkspur. They're faced by our neighboring agencies. They're faced by the private sector throughout Marin, in the greater Bay Area, and throughout the state of California. In terms of recruitment and retention, the city, when operationally possible, tries to allow employees flexible work schedules in the form of 410 and 980 schedules. For folks who don't speak fluent HR, this means that you can work longer days to have Fridays off, either every Friday or every other Friday. Is how Larkspur does it. We've also added a new position that is an HR analyst, and one of that position's task is to enhance our recruitment process and identify additional opportunities to improve the employee experience. So the only action for council to take tonight is 1, open the public hearing and take any public comment from anyone in the audience who would like to speak. As I mentioned, AB 2561 requires us to notify our employee organization, LMEA, and we did so. And they did not indicate the desire to speak tonight at this public hearing. And I don't see anybody online or in the room. And then once the public hearing is open and closed, that council accepts the report. So this concludes the staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions before we open the public hearing.
Any questions of that brief staff report? All right, I'm opening the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience in the room who would like to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll go to our Zoom room. Is there anyone in the Zoom room who would like to speak on this matter with a hand raised? No. Okay, I'm closing the public hearing and bringing it back to the council. Are there any further questions on this matter? Okay, then I will take a motion to as required for vacant positions, AB 2561.
I will make a motion to approve the report.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? No. Any abstentions? No. That concludes our public hearings for tonight. We do have 3 additional things, plus a closed session coming up. Business items, 3 of them. Would anyone like to take a 5-minute break? Yes. So you're up next, my friend. I'm sorry. So we're going to take a 5-minute bio break, but make it 5 minutes, please, and come right back. Thank you. Thank you, and welcome back to our regularly scheduled meeting on, wait, what day, what's today's date? May 7th, there we are. It's already approaching 9:30 and Larkspur doesn't do well after 10 p.m. So we are going to hopefully move through our meeting. This brings us to item 8.1, which is our business items. We have 3 tonight. 8.1 is the City of Larkspur Community Facilities District number 24-2, Larkspur Lagoon Bulkhead Replacement Project, authorizing the issuance of bonds. May we have a staff report? And thank you for your patience for being here.
I do not want my brevity to be interpreted as making light of issuing $22 million
No.
bonds, but in some respects, this is a fairly straightforward item, and we're getting later in the evening. The council has agreed to work with the residents who live around the Larkspur Marina Lagoon so that they could have a community facilities district, so that they could do a debt issuance to pay to repair the bulkhead. That's the wall that goes around the lagoon, which they with the council's help, they created the CFD. They voted to do the assessment necessary to do payments for any debt issuance, and now they've gone out to do the debt issuance, and they are seeking your authorization as the CFD board to procure the bonds. So that is what we're here to do this evening. This is a process that should be fairly familiar to the council from other debt service that you've done in other capacities. When we do this sort of work, we have a bond counsel available to us, and we have a municipal advisor. In that case, Mark Pressman from Wolf Hansen is your municipal advisor. He's present here. And I believe online is Lawrence Chan, who is bond counsel for this arrangement. And they're both available to answer any questions you have.
Okay, this is probably what the 5th time we've been part of this. I just want to be clear that we have been diligently working on this process with this neighborhood for a long time. And they all voted to accept this facility parcel tax for themselves. And this is the bond, which is the next process. Are there questions of the staff or Mr. Pressman? No? Seeing none?
Thanks for coming.
This is a business item and not a public hearing, but is there any member of the public who would like to ask a question on this? Okay, seeing none, I will, referring back to this business item, it looks like we have do we have
Resolution.
a resolution? I'm trying to find the resolution. Here it is.
2025.
2025, resolution of the city council for the special, not to exceed $22 million in municipal bonds, federally taxable bonds. Is that correct? Yes.
I will make that motion.
All right.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? No. Any abstentions? No. That matter passes. Thank you very much. Good night. That brings us to business item 8.2, preliminary fiscal year 2025-26 budget. And this is where we heard that we have $200 million, right? We have a presentation tonight, and just to acknowledge that we also have a public comment that has been added to the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. I am invited up Administrative Services Director Amelia Gabriel. And then there are other staff members available that I'll identify shortly. This is the first of 2 meetings during your May council sessions to go over the preliminary budget. The preliminary budget is the draft budget prepared by the city manager and the Administrative Services Director that encapsulates staff's recommendations for funding for next year. Today, in this session, we're going to do probably about 40%. We'll do a lot more heavy lifting actually at the next meeting in terms of the volume of the information. So tonight, May 7, we're going to do 3 of the departments in the city's budget: administration, library, and recreation. And then at your next meeting on the 21st, we'll do community development, we'll do public works. Public works will include a presentation of the preliminary capital improvement plan. And then we will also talk about recommendations for 3 special funds: Measure B, Measure G, and the transient occupancy tax.
And just a reminder that the May 21st meeting is an early start. Is that correct, Allison? Yeah, it's an early start at, did we say 5:30?
Yes, there's interviews on that evening, so
Okay.
those are at 5:30.
Okay, so just for the public to know, we will be starting early because we have a lot of content.
So tonight, we're going to first talk about the 3 departments and their accomplishments that are in the current fiscal year, and then some of the goals for next fiscal year. I'm going to do that to move us along, but the department heads are here. I want to acknowledge that from Recreation, Nick Stone's in the audience, and from the library in the back, there's Damon Hill. And also those are the 2 community services departments. They report to Assistant City Manager Shannon O'Hare, who sneaked out of the room. Okay. So what did we accomplish in administration this year? We transitioned human resources. We were in a collaboration with 3 other agencies for human resources. We've brought human resources into our administrative office and hired an HR analyst, and we now sell human resource services to the Central Marin Police Authority as part of the package of administrative services we provide to them. We heard a lot this evening. We've established the Climate Action Forum and have been working to increase our activity in terms of climate action and sustainability. We launched the rental registry, and we're right now actually collecting data from landlords and should have a report out to you toward the end of the fiscal year. That doesn't mean we'll have the registry completely ready to report out. We'll give you an update on where we are. And then our city clerk's office worked on implementing NetFile software, which allows all of our filings to move to electronic filing. And that actually goes hand in hand, a big initiative that Ms. Gabrielle's been on, which is to do a paper reduction. So we're working really hard to, if not eliminate, hopefully in the 90% range of the paper being generated by our finance operation. That's a significant transition for us, and we're partway through that now. It's pretty exciting. And it's a good collaboration with the clerk's office. As I'm sure the council's aware, the public may not be, it's a lot of work to document the destruction of our paper. We're not allowed to just throw it out. So they're going through those efforts now. I heard that. I could litter this slide with 100 bullet points about all the work that's been going on finance to upgrade and refine our systems, but I think the council, you've had the benefit of seeing that in real time over several council meetings. So I just want to thank Ms. Gabrielle for her leadership in that regard. I think we've been making great strides in our financial reporting to you and the public. Some of our goals for next year. So we use Laserfiche as our primary electronic system. We're going to upgrade and improve that so that we are consistent with state laws about how we store our documents so that they're preserved forever. We're going to refresh our 5-year IT master plan. We last did the master plan right before COVID, and those of you who are with us from COVID, remember we did 60 or 70% of the plan in 4 months in order to deal with the pandemic and the fact that we were working remotely. I don't think it'll be so dramatic this time, but it is time to look at changing technologies. I know it's the buzzword to say AI, and all my colleagues, I go to meetings and they're all talking about AI. So I wouldn't be shocked if this new plan talks about how we're going to integrate that into our operations as well. I promise we will not write our staff reports with ChatGPT, although it might be a better writer than I am. So.
Yeah, I've written a few things with that.
One thing we're working really hard with our new HR analyst is bringing up our training programs. We've really fallen behind, and I think we want to see our staff current with all the latest and greatest. So she's invested a lot of time for us, and I expect we'll be launching many programs next year internally at a very cost-effective approach. One of the reasons we've lagged in this area is we've always had to outsource, and it can get pretty pricey to pay for outsourced training. Okay, library. Damon's gonna let me sing the praises of the library for him. Oops, except those are not the libraries.
Should have used ChatGPT.
Yeah, really so. Okay, I'll have to do this offline because it looks like my slide presentation has a
No, it's just reversed.
oh, here it is. Okay, they're just labeled wrong.
They're just labeled.
So let's pretend that says recreation. So recreation's accomplishments. We are really pleased to see revenues continue to rise at Piper Park, which is a major revenue generator for us. A lot of great ideas with the staff that will be facilitated significantly as we bring back people. For those who don't know, our recreation director has been operating essentially as a one-man shop for the better part of the fiscal year, and we're hoping to rectify that shortly. We've had an uptick in our special events where we had 12 in this current fiscal year, which is a nice jump for us, and hoping to keep growing that number internally in terms of what we're providing to the community. A lot of new and strengthening partnerships. You'll note here, I think one we should be excited about is we've done a lot to communicate with the Twin Cities villages. I think outreach to our aging in place community is really important, and want to acknowledge Nick Stone for that effort. We're facilitated the beautiful upgrades that occurred at Niven Park, which we all got to celebrate earlier this year. And then really want to acknowledge our partnership with Larkspur Corte Madera School District. Not only is it a big revenue generator, but the two facilities that we manage with them, the gym and the all-weather field, are enjoyed by our youth during the day, and then by our youth clubs and our adult population at night and on the weekends. Goals for next year, we're gonna create more staff support so that we're not a one-man shop anymore, and we're very optimistic we'll have a recreation coordinator on board here shortly.
Good.
And then when the coordinator comes on, we want to expand our programming, and in particular revenue generating programming. So we're going to hold Nick Stone to this. We said the coordinator had to be super enthusiastic. I've always warned every recreation director that the number 2 person in the office is always way more popular than the director. So if he's done his job, he's hired somebody we will all like more than we like him. And we love Nick. I was about to say, and we love Nick. So, and then with the help of the recreation coordinator, that's kind of a repeat, maximize revenue, keep building on our special events. Okay, and then we wish this said the library, but we had a little typo. So the library is working on a new communication plan, which I think will be helpful, especially as we move into our new facility. And then this year, incredible amount of circulated materials. And I took out, Damon gave me all the breakdown, but it's pretty impressive. It's across all categories. But one thing that's jumped out to me is almost half that number, I think, is now electronic, different types of electronic media, which really tells you where the libraries are going. Even the Larkspur Library is now 50% circulating in the electronic media world. We have 48 volunteers now in the library.
Oh.
And I just want to pause here and say, having Damon on board, this is far more organized and coordinated than it's ever been. And I think it's why our numbers are jumping in terms of volunteers. Volunteers have a lot more understanding of what's being asked of them, when they should be here, the contribution that they make, and its value to us. Really want to thank the Friends of the Larkspur Library. They've been helping us supplement our programming budget, and we've done a lot of programmings across our youth. You can see we've been really targeting our youngest members of the community, but we are offering programming across several age groups. And we have adult programmings too, and I want to acknowledge that. And then Another thing we've been working on is early literacy activities in the children's room. Can't wait to see the new children's room and what more can be done there. So for next year, revise and implement a collection development policy. This is really significant because how we house the collection, how much of the collection is available at the new library is something we're working through right now. And that goes to the next thing, which is preparing for our new shelving systems and configurations in the new library. One of the things you'll see us do, I think early in the fiscal year, is start to survey the community as we try to figure out exactly what people want to see when we open those doors. And then working on a plan to be ready to go with new programming that takes advantage of the building and all it has to offer. Recognizing that we're going to be constrained in terms of our staff and staff numbers, but we're going to have technology to help us be efficient and continue to offer some wonderful programming to the community. And then in anticipation of moving in a new facility, it's going to be busier, different demands. We're going to revisit all our policies and procedures. So that is just kind of a quick overview. And then what Allison's going to have ready that we're going to put on the board now, it's in your packet, is the actual preliminary budget. Each of these departments and their department heads were asked to focus on holding the line this year and keep their budgets as flat as possible. Generally, we were able to accomplish that other than contracted increases to personnel costs. There's one question in your packet that we'd love to get some direction on this evening. Because we're in a constrained environment, some of the departments we've worked on cutting some of our operational expenses, our office expenditures, some of our travel. When we looked at the library budget, we didn't want to do that, especially in a year when we're going to move into a new facility. As we gave you in the packet, we have our own internal endowment fund, essentially. We received money from the estate of the Zimmer family that we refer to as the Zimmer account. It's been growing and has a nice nest egg in there. And we'd like to use that to avoid having to make cuts to circulation materials, particularly children's materials, in the coming year. We would have done sort of a across the board reduction, but we'd rather keep those numbers whole and draw a little bit out. And we're talking modest amount. I think we have 15,000 for that purpose, but it would help us keep those numbers whole in the library and not have to sustain those cuts.
Dan, I'm sorry, just real quick. I thought I read the Zimmer money we used about 150,000. Did I read that wrong?
No, 150,000, you might have been looking at there's a report of all past activity in the fund that's in the table
That
there.
was
The 150,000 was actually
Our seed money.
seed money given to the Commons Foundation back in the day from the original endowment, if you will. So, but in terms of what we're asking to draw out this year, it's 15,000, which is we've been earning interest
Yeah.
on that account, so we're still doing quite well. And aren't touching the principal in that account.
Now, that would be our approval for that, but if I recall, did we lock the Zimmer trust? Do we need to change anything on that, or can we, is it our discretion to?
Zimmer account, you created a policy.
Yeah, that's what I'm
This
thinking of.
recommendation is consistent
With the
that
policy.
Okay. It's a pretty broad policy. It essentially asks that the library director, in consultation with the library board as appropriate, bring to the city manager recommendations. I think when we crafted the policy, our original anticipation was sort of holding on to the money for one-time remodel
Right.
expenses, one-time equipment expenses. For example, I think we originally were going to buy the locker system that's behind
Right,
City
and
Hall.
then the
But then
foundation.
Library Foundation stepped forward to pay for it instead of using Zimmer money.
Okay.
So we haven't actually touched it, in part because some of the things we had in line to use the Zimmer money for, we suspended because of COVID, because at
Right.
that time our operation kind of closed to the public and it didn't make sense. And then when we realized the reality of our new library, it didn't make sense to draw a lot out of it. But these expenditures we're recommending now, these are collection expenditures, they'll go to the new library. So that's an investment now that carries forward.
Can I ask a question? I'm supportive of using the Zimmer funds for the new collection. At our last couple of meetings, there was the comment about it would be helpful to have a Spanish speaker at the library. Is this something that can be funded out of the Zimmer Fund or perhaps Friends of the Library or through a grant to help meet the needs? Because I know we are budget constrained, but it seems like there are different pockets of money for the library that the library might be able to access.
We can always come back to you with the Zimmer policy and we can talk about that. The way Mr. Zimmer's will read, it just said this money goes to the Larkspur
Right.
Library, had no restrictions on it. And we confirmed that with the state attorney. So it really is you as the 5 stewards of that money to decide if what you're voting to do with it is consistent with the wish that it be invested in the library. So you have a lot of discretion in terms of that
Yeah.
pot of money. We certainly will keep our eye out for grants. And
Well, I mean, I don't mean look for new grants, but it seems like, you know, the Friends of the Library had just had a huge fundraiser and we've got there's like 3 different library
Right.
nonprofits that
Yeah.
support the library. So I'm just saying if we have a need in the library, for instance, for the Spanish speaker that we heard about a couple of meetings ago, you know, could that potentially be funded from either one of those sources or?
let me ask Damon to come up for a sec. Can you call up the library budget screen? There's a number in the library budget for programming. That's not the full amount that the city's general fund contributes. A lot of what the Friends do is supplement the program budget. So Damon, when we call, whoa, I'm a little busy. When we find that budget number, Damon, if you want to speak to what the city contributes and then what the Friends put in, it'd be helpful for the council to understand. Because I think part of the success of the fundraiser was to make sure the programming budget is sustained next year.
Yeah, so our Friends group does a dollar for dollar match for up to $12,000 in the special projects fund. And we use that money for a variety of programs for early literacy, story time. We are considering, like Mill Valley and a few other libraries, bringing in a Spanish specific story time. And we've done some bilingual story times. So that's what the special project monies are generally for, is for programming that we pay for and supplies.
So I think we're headed in that direction.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay, great.
why don't you stay up here, Damon, just in case we dig in more.
You
Since
can
we're on
see-
library, we'll stay on library for a moment, maybe. So if there, one of the things we don't know, the great unknown for this budget, is what it really is going to cost to operate the new library. Because on the one hand, it's going to be a much more efficient facility. There will be a lot of costs that come down. But I think we are going to wrestle with questions of how much staff can we afford and how many days and hours of the week can we be open. That's something that I think we'll be debating at staff to make informed recommendations to you as we get closer to that day. I mean, in our dreams, we'd have unlimited funds, we'd have huge staff, we'd be open every day of the week. It's not practical or realistic, and we're going to have to find what that sweet spot is for Larkspur. And so this budget does continue a frozen librarian position that we froze in last year's budget. Damon, do you have any specific things you want to draw their attention to, or?
No, the one thing with the new building that I think we're going to be a lot busier with just people coming in. So that's just going to be something we have to balance with all our other programming. We might be just keeping the doors open, the operations, because we do want everyone in there and excited, but that has the flip side.
Yeah. I think there's something we should in the maybe in the fall or maybe in early January when we're getting closer, really have a deeper agendized item about that maybe. But not now. But as we're getting closer, later this fall, early January, something like that.
With the new community space, are we thinking about renting that out for a fee, or how are we to generate revenue, or
Yeah.
how, what's the?
We're coming up with, we have to
So
come up
we're
with
going to
all
need to
those
bring you
policies.
policies and
Okay.
questions about
All right.
that. And that'll, the technology is going to be there to facilitate rental if that's where we go. You're also, I think, gonna have to wrestle with, do nonprofits, for example, pay a certain rate versus private. So we will have to wrestle with all those things. We didn't project any revenue off the new building into this fiscal year budget. I think we did a quarter's worth of sort of flat inflation of, or inflated numbers of about 25%. Do you remember what we did for the budget for the last quarter of next fiscal year for the library? Because we were trying to guess it or what costs would be, or do we
We
just?
left it flat because we don't have enough information at
Okay.
this point.
Yeah.
So at mid-year, we're going to probably have to bring you what our estimates are.
Yeah, and I think that's something definitely, I mean, as the building gets closer and closer to opening, we need policies about what, as you describe, utilization, et cetera, that to enhance what we already have. So, but not tonight.
I think another great unknown for us that we're dealing with is a modern building brings a lot of technology. So a lot of technology needs a little more IT focus.
Yeah.
The library is an interesting entity because it has two different service providers for IT because it's on two separate networks. It's on the city's network, which is the city's IT contractor. It's also on the Scenic network, which is a statewide library network, which has a different contractor. So it's an interesting operation and one that we work our way through, but as luckily the Scenic costs are on the network. A lot of them are borne by the county system, but and before you ask, we're not allowed to run our office computers on the Scenic network. A different member got in trouble for trying to do that, so we don't do that.
But they have Signal and they can do the Signal app for public safety.
I think the mayor's in a mood.
I have. I got my Signal app open over here. Yes. You want to tell us anything
Oh.
wonderful?
I would just highlight what Barbara said earlier about Touch a Trucks, which
Yeah.
is just a really community, inspiration. I would say with the new library, we have a lot of opportunities for workload efficiency in terms of how the material will be returned. So I think it's going to be an interesting trade-off as we open up, but it's super exciting.
Yes, very much. Great.
Don't disappear in case they come up with more questions as we go along.
You can sit down though. It's okay.
So, other than that Zimmer question, I think one reason we kind of compiled these, we knew this was gonna be a heavy meeting, and so we were trying to give you the budgets that are maybe a little less complicated. So, next meeting, we dive into some of the ones that are a little more full of questions, but we're here to answer anything you have to ask us about. The only position frozen among the three departments tonight is that carryover of a librarian position. The other positions that we've frozen we'll be talking about next meeting.
So in the Park and Recreation, correct me if I'm wrong, but were we going to start a master planning process for Piper Park? Or is that in this year's budget?
So
or
Piper Park has a master plan. I think that Nick can come up and speak to
were we going to
interest in looking at it.
Okay. So have we go ahead, but have we budgeted for that looking at?
We have not budgeted for the master
Okay.
plan. One of Julian took a look at the current master plan, and we kind of decided that the master plan or the Piper Park is kind of built out.
Yeah.
And so going to through the process of doing a whole master plan, it was probably not worth it, and that we'd probably want to look to do some kind of amendments to it down the line. But right now,
Okay.
no plans for it.
Okay. Thank you. When are you putting the pickleball things in there? Next to the dog park.
Putting in the new.
No, I'm just
courts, or-
kidding.
You tell me.
You know, it's looking really nice. I have to say, we've had we've had a lot of rain, and so a lot of excess foliage for a while, but boy, between the new dog park and the way the new playground structure looks and the playground looks and the restrooms that are there, it's really looking good in my opinion. And you walk every day with the dog on a leash.
Yeah.
So of course, of course.
Yeah, DPW does a great job of maintaining the park. We get a lot of the questions about Piper and the state that it's in. And, during the winter, it rains, everything is soaking wet, and all of a sudden it just springs up at the same time that all the weeds around the city are popping up and stuff. So, once they're able to get a handle on the park, it just looks amazing. So right now, I think they just finished their last mowing of the lawn for a while, and all the weeds are brought down in the park. So it's people are happy out there.
Okay.
One thing we've talked about, and I'm hoping we'll be able to accomplish when there's a new employee on board, is to have an employee present for at least part of a Saturday, because a lot of our rental activity is on Saturday, and some of our renters report back the facilities they rent have been commandeered. People haven't been very respectful of the fact that it was reserved.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to send police officers out there who are the standard people we have on a Saturday. So we're trying to work out some ideas so we can occasionally have some staff people present to cope with that within their normal work week. So we're talking about creating a more creative work week schedule.
Is there anything we can do to help in your department?
One of the things we do, these events that we've been doing, I really enjoy, and I love seeing you guys at the events. So if you guys can help spread the word and come to these events, it's a lot of fun. I appreciate it. I think I saw most of you at the Pumpkin Patch this year. That's my new favorite event that I'm going to be talking about. So I had a great time out there, and yeah, spread the word.
Okay, great. Same question for the library. Anything the five of us can do other than?
I think, I guess keeping spread the words, and then, I think anything you can do with supporting fundraising would be very welcome. So I think those are the big items.
Great. Anything further?
Just a reminder, the other budget we are prepared to address tonight. You have your entire suite of management from the administrative department. One of the things that I talked about in our bullets is that we've been really working, and you have a council liaison now for this purpose, for climate action sustainability. We got our entire executive team together, talked about how to represent that activity in a new way in the budget. And we've landed on, while there will remain some promotional items in the general budget, we're going to actually create a CIP item for sustainability and climate activity. We have a couple, if you look at our CIP from the past, for example, you'll see there's an ADA section, right? It'll kind of mirror that. It's for those modest expenditure items that come up during the year that fit that category. And it allows the council to park money for that purpose that can carry over multiple years if it's not used. It also allows us to very easily report out to the community in a very transparent way how we've spent the money.
And I think that's been a question that's been asked for a while, that as an ability to really assess what we're doing as far as climate action. So that's a great addition. So it's been asked. I'm glad we're able to do that. Any other questions in this overview?
I had questions. I'm not sure if tonight's the right time to ask. A question about the TOT. I had a question about police and fire. Are we doing that next time?
So we're not doing police and fire budget. They're actually being presented
Thursday.
tomorrow to the two councils.
Okay.
So I'll have feedback after I know if those budgets have been passed. I can report, since I've been actively involved in working on them, and Ms. Gabrielle is the architect of the police budget. Other than the increased labor costs that we talked about at the last meeting, we've really flattened as much as possible. And I actually want to acknowledge, because we just saw the numbers today, Chief Martin worked really hard. I told him, you need to help out. You got to find some money in your budget. And if I understand it, he found about 160,000, 80,000 for each member agency in costs he could reduce. So that's a big savings. Both agencies are looking at the way they book overtime and the way they charge, so that maybe we can find some savings just in the way we sort of track and allocate.
Yeah, my specific question was, with police, with their budget, it was like 42% or up, 22 and 29, I think police and fire, but police had a lot of vacancies last year. They're going to be filled this coming year. And I was wondering how that's going to affect the budget if the numbers that we had this year reflected all those vacancies, or whether the way we were doing the math is that we assumed fully staffed and then somehow it was brought back in a different way.
So there was interest at the police council in introducing the concept of vacancy control into that budget. Vacancy control is actually programming an expectation that you'll always have a certain number of vacancies. There's a risk to vacancy control, but we're going to give it a try. We have a little bit of cushion in that budget. We have some savings that we've parked in a reserve to kind of make sure we hit our mark. But I believe there's 2.5 positions programmed that we expect vacancy. I can report one. The chief's very excited. In theory, he'll be fully staffed.
Exactly. That's what I'm afraid of. Yeah.
But I also know of at least 2 retirements coming very shortly thereafter. So right there's 2 vacancies, right? And that's the cycle. That's the reason I feel there's some comfort to introducing vacancy controls. It's just always churning in his agency. A lot more stable in fire, a lot less opportunity to program that sort of thing there.
Okay. Thank you.
So we've reached 10 o'clock, which is by our council policy.
10:30.
Is
Yeah.
it 10:30?
Yeah, 30 minutes.
I got to write that council policy better. Okay. He cut me off on that one. Do we have further content on this, Amelia? Okay.
No, she should jump in because again, she's doing all the
I know,
the
doing all the
work
heavy lifting.
here.
You're getting your office painted.
So, the admin unit, I think one of the hard things we're gonna try to find, we invested a lot in our own training this year, and I think we found the money to do that. That might be a little tough next year. We might have to tighten our belt in that regard. But really appreciative of the team. We're working pretty hard for you. And the other thing that is in that budget that we'll have to capture down the road, remember, there is a subsidy at the moment for the rental registry, essentially. Like eventually we'll recoup that cost, but right now we're fronting it in the general fund. So that's.
Do you have an estimate of what that is?
I think for the first year, probably it's a good 30% of a FTE, but plus the startup cost in the software was 50 or 60 grand, I think.
Yeah.
Does that sound about right, Shannon? Yeah. That FTE number will come way down. The software starts to take care of itself.
Right.
So then it's just the subscription on the software service after that.
So can we talk about that rental registry? Because I do want to figure out what the total costs are. And then do we plan on passing that all the way through to the landlords, or what do we plan on doing, and what's in this budget?
So once we're done with the first cycle, which our consultants recommended and we've discovered most cities do, is you don't charge the first year. You get everybody to participate and you get the system built. And then you do a fee study based on what you now know are your true costs. And then one of the questions for the council is, do you want to recoup the first year costs by spreading it into future year fees? You have the decision as a council how much cost recovery you want to do. Most cities do full cost recovery on the operation of the rental registry, but you're not required by any law to do that. So we haven't had that discussion yet. It's not built into this budget at this time.
Okay. So that can be something after the summer to look at for.
It's probably even later.
Probably.
We want to make sure we understand our burden and the burden on the
property
rental
owners.
community.
Yeah.
In terms of participating in the registry. The registry is open for its initial data input right now. I've been told by staff there was a big rush at the beginning. It was mostly folks who wanted to get their submissions in that they're exempt from the rental
Oh,
registry,
okay.
because you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to explain that you're exempt. Now we're kind of in the cycle of waiting for our larger properties to do all their entries. Some of our smaller ones have done theirs. And I think that's open for another till the end of the month or, okay. Yeah, I should stop speculating since the expert's here.
So we're, in terms of what will be available in terms of recouping cost, understanding staff time, that's all being logged right now. So the bulk of the cost will be the software, internal staff time. And I do just want to mention, although it's ended up being really nominal, we do have a contract with Echo Housing that provides resources to both landlords and tenants. A lot of times for landlord tenant law, that falls outside of our rental, all of the rental regulations that we've passed. That hasn't been very cost effective and has actually been a much lower fee than staff has anticipated. There was the first wave of folks who wanted to be exempt. Anyone who was identified as having an ADU was identified as a potential rental property. So a lot of those folks were exempt because they weren't renting that space out. Now we're back. I've sad to report, Dan, that it calmed down and we're back. Then everyone's catching up. It's until June 2nd that we've asked our landlord community to participate in the registry. So I don't have the exact numbers, but the ballpark numbers that are pretty close. If we fielded close to 60 calls to help people set up registries, and then just a handful of emails. And we suspect that as it gets close to the deadline, there'll be another wave of assistance that folks ask for. But it's really just setting up the initial, once you have your information in the software, if you're an ongoing landlord, depending on what your tenant turnover is, et cetera, it becomes a lot easier once you know the software and you're in the system. So the staff investment in time will be a lot more in year one.
Okay. Is there anything further on this item at this point?
Well, if you have questions for us.
Yes.
Sorry, more questions. Okay.
Please.
The Skylark appeal, there's a footnote. It's 223,000, which is significant. From what I understand, it's a 1-year reduction or a credit back to them for 2023, I think it is. So they basically appealed the property taxes, and so they won. And so is there anything, I guess city attorney can chime in here, what are the options available to us? And I think, we should be thinking about what our response might be, because there's a potential that Prime could appeal another year, another tax year, and we'd be looking at multiple years of lost tax revenue. So I'd like to hear, what our options are available to us. Can we participate in the process, or because we're the city, we're not allowed to? The assessor participates on our behalf. Like what is the process here?
And I'm sorry, I'm going to add to that question. Also, is there some type of analysis of what that reduction was based on, if it was based on our rent control laws or just a decrease in property value? Is there any kind of breakdown like that?
Yeah, so I think we probably should have an agenda item that's clearly about these questions. This is kind of a little off topic from the budget itself. I'm happy to put on the next agenda. I will simply report out, I am making persistent requests of the appeals board to get the documentation. It seems to be a strangely convoluted process, but I'm new to asking the assessor's appeals board, which is not the assessor. It's a different entity that the assessor works with, for their documentation, but I will continue to try to seek it. I believe it will answer a lot of the questions that you have. And then procedurally, I'll work with city attorney and we'll report out the next meeting what your options may be.
Yeah, and I think we do need, this is an issue that would require, I think, an agendized item and notice to many people who are interested and concerned about this matter.
So for the benefit of the community with respect to the budget, as I understand it, and it's generally what the Vice Mayor said, there's a process whereby any property owner, but particularly this is common in commercial properties and often in multifamily rental properties, is that if you believe circumstances in the economic environment devalued your property in a given year, you can do a petition to have an assessed value assigned to the property for that year. It's not the assessed value that's locked
total,
in by the sale. That's still a separate number. And so to Vice Mayor's point, my understanding is you have to go appeal for each year, and there's a lag. That's why the current year that was appealed was actually 2 years ago, is because you have to wait till all the variables are known to the appeals board so that they have all the information to consider it. So in the case of prime, they would need to, the assessors made it clear, I believe, in what I've been able to glean so far, and it's for our budgetary purposes, that property value is going to stay at the sale price, and but prime can come back each year. That's really hard for us budgetary wise. So
Yeah.
we have to wait and hear if we're getting hit each year. We know this hit has come in and is going to carry through the fiscal year numbers that we've presented to you. That's why we built it in as a number. We're actually seeing it, I believe, as a monthly deduction from allocations that the
Yeah, on the second payment that we received from the county for property tax, we had a reduction of $16,000 that was confirmed by the county. But this is just like an amount for, it's not for the full year.
yeah,
basically.
then that was just to reconcile the last one we got. Then the two payments we'll get in the next fiscal year will reflect 223,000.
So it sounds like from your question, it would be very important for us to have this agendized to understand what possible will be the ramifications
Yeah, I
in
just
the
want to
fiscal year.
caution you, if I can't get the
I know.
documents, I'll only be able to tell you
I
what
understand.
I do have to report.
Yeah. But we know where we are for this fiscal year, at least because of the appeal that's been approved. I understand that. But moving forward, it'll be important because if this may influence our policy decisions about the ordinances that we've passed, or it may not. So
I'm sorry, just one quick follow-up question. You said there's a lag of about 2 years.
2 years.
Does this mean that the appeal was for a year prior to when our rent control went into effect?
It was the 23 tax year, I think.
Which it already got.
So that would have been,
It went retroactively, so it may have gone back to
so
20.
it would have been that your ordinance was in effect back to March of that year, I think.
August? Yeah, March, May 5th or something like that.
So
Okay.
a good portion of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions right now? So our next meeting, so you would like our approval for the $15,000 to use from the Zimmer?
It's direction, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
So I didn't hear anybody have heartburn. So
No.
unless somebody has heartburn and tells me right now, that's going to be built into the final
Got it.
budget.
Are we okay with that?
And then it'll be presented to you as a more formal
Yes.
recommendation.
So our meeting, our next time will also be a budget presentation and be prepared for that.
A lot more questions because you'll be talking about the two sales tax measure accounts, and you'll be talking about
Yeah.
the POT, and there's a lot of questions assigned to those funds.
Right. Great. If there's no further questions, we'll move to 8.3, which is appoint the Larkspur Citizens of the Year.
One's all you, Madam
This
Mayor.
is all us. So Larkspur has a tradition of recognizing Citizen of the Year, which is an honor we've given to residents at the sole discretion of the City Council. And generally, that individual is thanked very much for their contributions to the community and gets the joy of riding in the 4th of July parade, so that if they choose. But they also get an accommodation or a proclamation from us that we develop. And in the past, we have had community members of all different stripes. So I actually had an idea, and I spoke with my colleague Sarah about it. I only spoke with one, so it's still legit. Did you want to put forward someone?
So yeah, I do have a nomination for Citizen of the Year for David Mahler. I'd like to nominate David Muller for Citizen of the Year Award and by proxy Robin too. David has proven himself to be an invaluable member of Larkspur with an unwavering dedication to protecting our natural resources and the beauty that is both Larkspur and surrounds Larkspur. He has consistently shown up at council meetings with courtesy, thoughtful public comment, backed by research and data, and has illustrated a willingness to partner with the city to drive the city's 2030 climate action plan forward. David exemplifies public service and is an inspiration through his stewardship of the environment and knowledge of the complex network of agencies, resources, and programs to drive change through policy and public education. It is a privilege to work alongside him. Thank you, David and Robin, for all that you do for Larkspur. Although Robin's public voice isn't often witnessed, I suspect she has a lot of influence and contributes to most of David's great work, if not all.
I definitely affirm that in fact, Sarah and I spoke about it, and in my years of doing this work, David and Robin have been very informed participants, very actively engaged with the city and our city staff, and bringing forward ideas, having done their homework, having done their research, and really stepping up to help. So I affirm the same decision.
I think that is a spectacular nomination. I would agree.
All right. It sounds like we have consensus, yes?
Yeah.
Well, yes, and I just want to say that Robin actually was the one who encouraged me to run for office. And so she's
even better.
She's great.
I take mine back.
All right, so it sounds like consensus. We were pleased to appoint our citizens of the year, David and Robin Mahler. Cheers to them, and we'll work with you on something about that, Allison. Terrific. So we are going to adjourn to closed session, and then we'll return. It should be a shorter closed session. And thank you very much for your patience. We'll be back. All right, we have returned from closed session, and we have no reportable action. It is now 10:42, and we will reconvene. We've reconvened in open session, and we will adjourn for our regular meeting May 21st, 2025, and we will begin early that night. So looking forward to seeing everybody then. Good night.